Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Deep Dive with High Tide. Today, I'm joined by Criticless Blaine. Blaine, welcome on in. If you don't
Yeah,
mind, introduce yourself for those who might not know you.
sure. Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here on your first one of these specific show. But yeah, my name's Blaine. I am the owner, operator, founder, creator, whatever you'd like to dub me, of Criticless.com. We're a entertainment reviewing platform, a website, an app. We kind of do it all, but we're essentially the counter Rotten Tomatoes, but a more social alternative, kind of a throwback to the MySpace days and the old message board days, mixed with a platform that is for reviewing movies and television shows. So you can, you know, watch and review whatever you're watching lately, and then also go in and hang out in groups. And like I said, with the message board part, hang out with all your friends and people that like-minded. But we have groups of people that talk about things that have nothing to do with movies. We have conspiracy groups, we have you name it. So Criticless has become kind of a catch-all social platform in a lot of ways for a lot of people, where they're pivoting over to us versus going over to your typical Facebook or Instagram or X or wherever, because we are everything entertainment. So people are going to, and with this specific community that I've kind of found myself in, especially with the YouTube sphere, everybody talks mostly about entertainment and things. So it's like it would make sense for everybody to kind of congregate in a place that is specific to that. So that's really what it is. And we're constantly evolving and changing. But yeah, right now we're a website and an app, and big things planned for the future. And we continue to grow. And it's been real fun digging in with everybody in the space.
Nice. Well, want to shout out some people in the chat. Thank y'all for being here. Naganal,
Mhm.
Marianne, A2. Appreciate y'all for being here. But yeah, since we're talking about Criticless, I want to start off with how did you get the idea for Criticless, and kind of walk me through like what was the sequence of events from like you getting the idea to making that a reality.
Yeah, the sequence of events of idea to reality is was a long running thing, because I actually mentioned recently to someone, it was kind of wild. When I went live with the app and the site and everything, I got a message from a guy that I went to high school with, and we were buddies in college and everything else. And he was like, "Dude," he's like, "You've been talking about this since we were like freshmen in college." He's like, "This is insane that you actually ended up building this place." So, I've been talking about this for almost almost 20 years. And I had the idea a long time ago. I was Rotten Tomatoes has been around forever, and critics have been a thing for as long as we can remember. And I just always was noticing that there was kind of this disconnect between where critics set with entertainment and where your general audience, your regular folks set. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with, a more critical, hyper analytic perspective on film and entertainment. But the thing is your everyday, viewer quite often is not going to be on the same page. And I found myself constantly not on the same page, where I'd see something and I'm like, dude, this movie is awesome. Like, and it got a freaking 10% or something on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, what the hell is happening? And
Yeah.
so, it's one of those things too. As I dug in and started looking at the scale, I don't know how familiar you are with the Rotten Tomatoes scale, but like the scale sucks. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really work. It's like it's essentially a thumbs up, thumbs down with how it kind of weighs its scale. I mean, not
You're talking about
exactly.
the critics one
Yes, yeah,
specifically? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. With the critic one specifically, because it's of how the scores are weighted, and really like the fact that it's not like every critic is being like, I gave this movie an 80%, and that is factored into a pool of all the critics who gave it different percentages, right? So it's not this fair number.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work the same. And I'm like, this scale's broken. Also, these critics' opinions and stuff don't align. But then I'm kind of like, then the thought became, over more recent years, when I started actually building it and creating it, I'm like, it makes sense for this in our current day and age, and where social media is and everything, for this platform to not just be, just a review site, right? Where people just come on and just drop a review and do what with it, right? So basically, they over time, the over time, the way that I kind of was brainstorming was like, we need to just build this into a full social place, and make it very easy and user friendly to just an everyday user. And so even like our rating scale, I based it, where it goes from now the whole site is retro themed, right? So I was like, I'm going to make it fun, right? This should also be fun. The whole internet is sterile and boring and sucks. So why not make it more entertaining and interesting to look at? So we gave it this 80s, 90s like retro aesthetic vibe to it, the synthwave neon colors and all that. And then the same with the scale. And I was like, how about even the scale? Let's make it something that everybody can, well, not everybody, but at least people can click with and relate with, where what I ended up doing with our color scale is actually based off of a loot scale from video games. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
No, I didn't, but yeah, now you say that, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so like our color scale is the loot scale minus the red being the
Yeah.
base, but I'm like, red makes more sense than a gray, right? And it's gonna catch your eye more than like a gray weapon would. So
Yeah.
so the lowest is a red, the highest is a gold, and it's at the tier ranking from there up. So, and as Banjo in the chat points out, 50's his jam. He loves giving things 50%. It's funny how people with this scale, it clicks in different ways with different people, right? Because that's the thing is with a more granular scale like this, it's like, 50%, we call it a decent. Like I don't consider decent bad. Like decent it could go either way, right? And I think that's how a lot better way to view things. If I see a decent, I'm like, oh, I might still check this out. Versus on Rotten Tomatoes, if it's a 50%, I see a splat tomato and I'm like, oh, that probably sucks. I saw it was a splat on Rotten Tomatoes,
Yeah.
So
Well, that's one thing I've noticed too, is that I've just recently started reviewing movies on Criticless, and I'm thinking about I'm seeing decent, and that's how I feel about it. But then the percentages, once you get into 60s and 70s, that's rad now. But I'm like, that is more. I feel more decent about it. But I think it is more swayed by. I don't know if you've noticed, but more people when they say something's decent now, they'll say, "Oh, this is a 7 out of 10." You always hear it's a 7 out of 10 if people just think it's okay. Nobody
right.
really calls anything a 5 or below unless they think it's bad. They don't
Right.
really, people don't really go too low on scales. I think it's because of the grading system, probably, but
Exactly,
like,
exactly. I've cracked on the school grading system for years where I'm like, it doesn't really make sense in this context, right? Where it's like, even if you were to think about a pool of people, if 50% of people like something, then you have a 50% chance of liking it or not, right? So
yeah,
that, like, to me, decent aligns better with that and makes more sense than, like, I don't consider a 70% or something decent. I think we have just been so programmed from grade school to think that, like, if it's under a 60 or a 70, it's bad. And it's like, what, why? Like, why does that have to be the case? Like,
yeah,
we're not kids in school. Like, this is the world is more, granular than that. There are grays areas and everything. And so I think our scale tends to work, and it does after time and people kind of getting used to this system. It seems to be, at least from what I've noticed, that it becomes like, it just does kind of make sense. And it's felt like it has for me. And because, when creating it, that is the one thing I didn't have fully ironed out, and I didn't until we got into like full design. I wasn't sure what the scale was going to look like or how it was going to be. I knew it needed to work differently than Rotten Tomatoes. I just wasn't sure how. And so I just started like watching more movies and like started thinking about it. And I'm like, this kind of feels like it makes more sense to me. And so that's what kind of what I went with, and everything just kind of continued to lean further into that retro vibe. So, the naming and having bogus and heinous and rad and most excellent and whatever is just it's more fun way to talk about it.
yeah. Well, what were some of the other skills you were considering while making the site?
Um, I early on, it's kind of like everything where they were all just boring, right? It's just, some of them were just like uh numbers based, right?
Mm,
And just more standard wording around each of them. Um, but I think I always liked the more 20% scale. I was leaning towards that most of the time. But the wording was just like less interesting. Um,
yeah,
it kind of, you just think like good, bad, terrible, whatever, that kind of thing. And I'm like,
yeah,
that sucks. Like, that's not fun. That's not interesting. Um, And I like this more over. I know there are like people that gravitate towards like a star system or a thumb system, different things, or like a 5 point system. And like even with the 5 point system, I'm like, it's still just a lot less granular. Like you have a lot less choice. And when you're talking about once you make it into a giant audience scale, then it kind of works even less. Like I don't feel like it clicks as well either. Like I do think with Rotten Tomatoes working on that 100 point scale, that was the one thing that worked with that amount of numbers that they were kind of working with. But outside of that, it just you know, it took a little time, but it was fun planning it out. And I mean, as Risket's kind of pointing out in the chat, is having all the other scale sliders that we have. Those were fun to add as well, like our left and right and political bias meter and all that stuff. That was because that people are like, oh well, make it like a woke meter, and and I'm like, that's dumb. Like,
Yeah,
no. For one, like that's a very time specific, kitschy kind of a terminology.
yeah,
And it's already we've seen is kind of aged and is like lost its meaning. Where now we're kind of like, what even is woke? Um,
yeah,
so even for that, and also, I mean, it's now even over time, if I had done something like that, we've seen to where like there are even people on the furthest of right or certain areas where it's like you guys are kind of starting to sound woke, or you're starting to say things that just sound kind of the same but just on the opposite side of the coin. And I knew that was going to happen, and I'm like, we can't do it that way. It's not going to work. And so luckily, this that does work. And as Risket said, like if I had more of like the progressive, liberal, libertarian, whatever, like that did cross my mind as well. The only thing is we are worldwide, and so I found that a lot of these terms, even just left and right, in all honesty, tend to get lost in translation a little bit depending on which country you're in.
yeah. I've noticed
So
that too. There's certain YouTubers I watch that are in different countries, and they'll say things, and people from this country will be like, you're conservative, you're far right, you're this, you're that, and they're like, I'm not even part of your political system. They'll be like, oh, you love Trump. They're like, I'm not even a citizen of the United States. I don't care about that. I have nothing to do
right,
with that.
right.
So yeah, I think you're definitely right that it's very much a US thing to be so caught up in a lot of these different labels and everything else.
Yep. And we have some people in different areas of Europe and stuff. We have a decent amount of Australians actually, and I've had some of them actually talk about. We've even tossed around ideas of if we get big enough, making a way for some of that stuff to be viewed like regionally to look a little different. Where it's like if you're located in here, it might say different things. Um, and then also having a way where it could, if you're regional, it actually give us like regional breakdowns for reviews, right? Where it's like you can see kind of how, depending on where you're located, like how people are kind of interpreting entertainment.
Yeah,
It could be pretty neat. So we've definitely had talks with people from other countries that have found their way onto Criticless, over the past couple of years that we've been alive and kicking.
yeah. Well, again, once again, appreciate y'all for being here. Pablo's movie says, love Criticless is a great community and fun place to give your thoughts on movies and TV. Also got a Risk Kit. Boomer just joined in, and not really a fan of your jaw reviews, Blaine.
I don't even know. I don't know what he's talking about. I haven't heard anything about this Jaws review. I don't know
Yeah, no,
anything about
nobody
it.
knows. Never happened.
Mm-mm. It's a conspiracy, actually. I think to just take me down. It's just one of the many,
Yeah,
ever
someone
evolving.
hacked his account and posted that. They trying to
Hmm.
slander his name.
Right, and then we just decided to like leave it just for posterity's sake. Leaning into the meme, if you will.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all it is. That's all it is.
But sticking on the scale, I want to talk with you about just how you rate movies overall, especially on a scale of 0 to 100, because I was most recently watching a couple of the MCU movies that come out in the past year that I didn't really care to see. Um, I'm trying to share my screen. Oh no, I just hit. Okay. my first time doing this. Give me a
Yeah,
little bit of
it's
leeway.
it's that little plus with the computer monitor.
Let's see.
On it.
Okay, so here we go. So
There you go.
some of my most recent reviews, Fantastic Four, right?
Mm-hmm.
I watched this movie. I didn't really think it was bad, but my problem with it, as I say at the beginning, they try to skip over the origin story, but they gave no background on the characters, and they never really did throughout the movie. So therefore, gives you little reason to care for these characters outside of they're just the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
But see, I gave it a 60, even though I don't feel like it. You know how I was talking about earlier about the decent scale?
Yeah.
I feel like this is more in the decent range, how I would describe it. But I
Right.
wouldn't give it a 5 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10. You know
So
what I
I'll tell
mean?
you what happens here, and I do it. I know so many. It becomes kind of almost a meme. What people do, they'll go to a 59. They'll give it a
Yeah.
59 so that it reads a decent, but it's 1 point from a rad, and they're like, it was kind of there, but it's still just decent. And I do that one a lot. I actually think I just did it with the new Wonder Man show. I
Mhm.
was but I actually gave it a decent, I gave it a good score. I gave it a rad, but I was like between rad and most excellent, and I'm like, I'm just going to give it a 79. So I do that one a lot, and a lot of our users do as well. Another funny thing that you'll notice start to happen the more you use Criticless, and I've talked to more people about it. I'm like, does this happen to you too? If you use the app a lot, you'll kind of, while you're watching things, you'll almost like visualize this scale in your head kind of sliding around. You know what I mean? And you're
Yeah.
like, and I find myself doing that. Now, granted, it happens more often in movies that I don't like than movies that I do. Like if I'm fully engaged, I'm all in it, I won't really think about it as much. But if it's something that I'm not liking as much, I'm like, this is hanging in the rad. Oh, maybe it's, or, it's going down to decent, or, so it's kind of a funny thing that starts to happen. And I do know a few other people that have been like, yeah, it's weird. It just kind of starts to happen because I think there's something intuitive about having a slider scale,
Yeah. Yeah.
that just kind of feels natural.
And Riska brings up a good point. One of the best features is being able to change your reviews. There have been some that I thought were most excellent upon first watch. Then after thinking things over, it turns into just rad. I agree with that too.
Yeah.
Some of these, like I said, at first with Fantastic Four, I rated a 44% just because I wanted that decent scale, and 44 just kind of be funny. But the more I thought about it, I was like, it's not an actual 44. Like if I'm thinking on a grand scale of movies, it's not really that bad. So
Right.
I think that is a good feature to
Yeah,
have.
and we've even debated on doing like a kind of a last edited thing, so that it reads that way. There are people that actually what they want us to do, and it would probably be a premium feature for like our Crit Club kind of membership if we did it, I would think. But there are a lot of people that want us to add like stacking reviews, but basically you pick which one is prioritized. So like the way it would work is, let's say like you have like your on first watch review and score, and then you could go and review it again, and you say like, this is my priority review, this is going to go towards like the major, you know audience score. But
Mhm.
you rate it again, and you're like, on second viewing, blah 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 blah, and you write all that out. And so you could kind of stack like several reviews of like over time if your opinions change on a movie.
Yeah. Well, I just thought about something while scrolling right here because I was gonna scroll all the way to try to find the the Jaws review.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a feature where you could look up if someone has reviewed a movie? Unless
Yes,
I think you can probably look if they're on your friends with benefits, right? So if I go
you can
to
do that.
Jaws and then here and then yeah,
Yep.
right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
So
that very fake review that never happened.
so which
Um,
one? If I click on this, will it just bring to your? Nah,
yes.
bring to
So
your.
actually, though, no, stay there for a minute. Actually,
Oh,
on my profile, I'll show you. Scroll
I'm
down.
going
There's a
back.
really cool
All right.
feature. See where it says calendar right there? Oh, just scroll past it.
Oh
Right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Click that. This is everything I've ever reviewed.
Oh, okay.
You can search by month, year, genre. You can type it in. There you go. And everybody's account has that. This is a feature that people find way after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, it's an awesome feature, super helpful. We're talking about making those specific buttons and a couple others pop out more, so that they're more noticeable.
Yeah.
This place has evolved a lot since we launched. Like, for example, the calendar was not in the app when we launched. Um, there are a lot of the things to do with notifications and stuff. Honestly, the notifications and all that are the bane of my existence. I hate them with all my heart and soul. But the all of that is stuff that when you're really like making a social platform, sometimes you really don't think about all the ins and outs of like what people are going to want and how, and then on top of that, like what people aren't going to want. And so it's been this Criticless has been in this ever evolving kind of machine, and it's been fun, and it's been very interesting seeing what people do and don't want, and then also the features that people think they want, and then you explain why they don't, and they're like, oh, good point, yeah, I'm glad you didn't put that in here.
Like what? What's a example of a feature that
um
people said they want, but you're like, wouldn't really work as well?
a lot of the things tend to deal with like digging like into the weeds, or it's been a while, honestly. People have kind of we've really fleshed out the site. Now people tend to just want more, in a good way, as far as like not unreasonable things, if that makes sense. I wish I could think offhand of some of the weird stuff that people have asked for, where I'm like, it most of the time it ends up resulting, it's like things that would break other features, if that makes sense.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah.
there's certain things that you don't really think about when you're not developing it and you're not on this side of like creating it, and then when you think about all of the other features that it could screw up, that's when things kind of get hairy. It's been a huge learning experience, because I'm not a coder or a programmer. I've never ran a website. I've never done anything like this before. I've never built any of this. Now, my dad was a computer programmer. He's an OG like IBM guy. He was literally one of the guys in IBM that designed computer chips that were like huge, and he worked his way up through IBM, and has just been a coder and do in that, networking and all of that his whole life. So I've been around it, and I was like the first person I knew with a computer in my house, the first person I knew with the internet. So I was around it all, but I never did it. I went more blue collar for my whole life. But so this has been a huge learning process, and luckily my dev team is the shit. They're very good at what they do. And my main developer, a guy out of Hawaii, actually. He's a robot. We're not even fully sure that he's not just like an AI being, because he's just a machine and does awesome stuff. So
Well, what was the process of like getting this all built out? Like, how did you find a team to put this together? How do you kind of go throughout the process of you know explaining the sort of style you want, the features you want? How do you kind of go about that?
yeah, that's difficult. It took months and months. And essentially what I did was I sat down, like I said, since I don't code, I don't do any of this. And I did do some graphic design when I was younger, but it had been so long, like that I didn't even know how to hardly run a lot of the programs and stuff anymore. So it all ended up being pen and paper. And I just sat down, I started drawing all this out. I'm like, this is what it's going to look like. You click here, it does this. You click here, it does this. Like, this is how all of this is going to work and look. And then I was able to take that to my dev team, but kind of rewinding a little bit, finding the dev team. Um, there's actually a site where you can basically people can review and find developers, but the big thing is your first choice is deciding like US or outside of the US, because you can get it done for a quarter of the price if you do it outside of the US. But I refused to do that. I'm like, if I'm going to practice what I preach, like if I'm going to support this country and want to make a difference and really like lean into the American values that I've always talked about and kind of preached on, I had to find a US dev. And so I found about four of them. And then I basically went through an interviewing process where I interviewed them. And the dev that I actually went with, Twin Sun out of Nashville, they actually ended up borderline like interviewing me. And they initially told me, they're like, you don't want to do this, like, well, this is like, don't do this. and
Yeah.
uh and I was like, y'all are the first people that have told me that. I was like, there's like I feel like I kind of appreciate that. I was like, tell me why. And so then we kind of dug into it more and more. And they actually fell in love with the idea. They had one of their developers that was like, I've wanted to build something like this my whole life, and I'm super passionate about it, and I'll take the lead on the project, and I want to do this. And so that was another thing that really sold me. And so, like I said, they're out of the US, they're in Nashville, and they were just super passionate about it and wanted to do it. And then it was just a matter of really drilling in with like their designer and finding out like, can you make what I want, and can we get it to look like this, and can it work? And so then that was, months and months of design, and then you go in to start coding it and actually, making it a reality. And then you have to decide if you're going to make it on web or you're going to make it on mobile. We did both, and we actually got like halfway through web development and had to scrap it all and start all over, because we took a risk and we're building it on a different platform that wasn't ready for something as complex as what we were building. Um,
Mhm.
and so there's a lot of interesting things that happen when you get into this. And like I said, it's about having the right team. And my guys are really good. If I had gone out of the country, and even just being able to explain a lot of what I wanted and just the creative aspects of all of this site would not look, work, feel even remotely as good as it does. But it comes at a price, and it's a lot more expensive to do it in the US. And that's just kind of how it is. And you have to either be okay with eating that bullet, or you know, making a lesser product by doing it out of the country. Um,
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of goes into a different question I had. How did you know that this was a good business to start? Because I'm sure that, with a lot of things, people have ideas for businesses all the time, but you got to think of like, money put into it, what you get out of it, everything else. How did you know like this was worth the risk to try to start up?
yeah. Um, so for it was kind of one of those things like we knew that there were a lot of other successful web platforms, and so you kind of have to look at the closest comparisons, right? And the problem with doing something like this is that it does usually take 3 to 4 years to become any level of profitable. That's
Yeah.
just how it goes. So you have to be okay with that up front, which sucks, because it's just, you're having to deal with ongoing development, you're having to deal with server space, all that stuff. But so it's really is the long game with building a app or a platform, a site like this. And so also it was just this was, I felt, a public service that the world kind of needed, and a more free speech forward, alternative, and a place that supported all ideas and opinions and mindsets, and was just it was kind of one of those things where we're like, we're not 100% sure this is going to work, or that it's well, everybody else involved was. I was like, it's going to work. To what degree, I don't know, but it'll work. And because I knew what people were kind of longing for in this space and talking about entertainment and all that. Um, Now we are still in that point of being like, how do you really become profitable in a space like this, and make enough money to stay alive and continue to, but a lot of it has to do with growth, because that's the thing people
Yeah.
don't realize is like, in your mind you're like, oh well, I can just, advertising on the site, we'll have advertisements and we'll make money off of advertising. But basically, until you hit like the millions of users, you're going to make pennies on advertising,
Yeah.
and that's just how it goes. So outside of like selling advertising to like a company that believes in what you're doing, right? Where it's like kind of like how a lot of people in this community use Meta PC, where it's like if we went directly to Meta PC and we're like, hey, we'll give you all of our ad space for X amount of time, you can do things like that, but still it's not going
Yeah.
to sustain you forever.
Yeah.
And I did, before I forgot about this, I did see a comment pop up in the chat that I wanted to address, by Vince Barter, talking about
Yeah.
getting more traction on Criticless. So one of the big things with starting the app is, I wanted to. I didn't want to use a ton of manipulative algorithms and stuff, because so many other platforms already do that, and I wanted to leave the growth up to the user. um, so as far as growing on Criticless, I'll tell you the number one easiest way to do it, and it will actually happen pretty fast, is if you just start liking and commenting and following other users. In all seriousness, that is the number one way, and it will happen pretty quick. Um, if that is what will drive engagement for your reviews, is just interacting with other people. We see folks that do that. They'll come in, and that's the first thing they do. They just start following a bunch of people, commenting a bunch, and they might do that for like a week, and all of a sudden you'll be like, this person's been on the app for a week and they've got like a ridiculous amount of followers for how long they've been here. And so and just activity in general. So and joining groups and stuff as well will help. But and I'm not saying like you've got to be hyper dedicated and be on our platform 100% of the time. It's not that. It's really not. Our user base is pretty faithful, and they just like people that are active. And so sometimes also I will tell you, we do, so like as far as the algorithms thing go, we had to start running some not really algorithms, but I just learned that like you would have people that would spam the feed if like you let every review a person does hit the feed, right? So it's like, okay, well, like you have to get a certain amount of likes for something to hit the feed if you have above X number of followers. Certain things like that, where we did have to kind of start to control it a little bit. Otherwise, the feed turns into a shit show.
Yeah, well, what I've also noticed is, like you said, the groups. If you know, the Monday Hangover, especially, like they're reviewing a movie. If you post your review, most of the time you'll get a decent amount of engagement on that. So I think that's probably a good way as well.
Oh yeah,
And,
absolutely.
But yeah, with that though, kind of going back to the rating scales. That is not what I want to do. Okay, here we go. Okay, so like with the scales, how do you personally rate movies? Because I'm looking at some of these, right? Like I brought up like Sinners, right? 24%. Now, me myself, I didn't really like the movie, but I definitely would not say it's anywhere close to a 24. Or just like some other movies, you know, like some of these that are like high 90s versus not. Like, how would you personally say you make that decision of where a movie sort of stands?
So everybody does clearly operate on a totally different scale. That is absolutely the case, and something I've noticed. And especially hands down, the more autistic you are, the more particular you are about how this scale works. But yeah,
what are you trying to say, Blaine? What are you trying to say?
I mean, listen, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not, which my wife has said the longer I've had this site, the more autistic I become. But but basically, I typically, first and foremost, is entertainment. How engaging it was, how enjoyable it was, and like the end emotion that I leave the movie with, right? That tends to be, or show, or whatever it is, but that tends to be how my overall rating really. That is the biggest weight with doing a review, for me personally. Now, then comes in like a close second is literally just quality, like cinematography, you know, sound design, acting, you know, those big, like those major tenets of like what makes something good, right? But like on the same hand, I could watch the shittiest movie ever made, but if I have an absolute blast, if I have just a ton of fun with this super shitty movie, I have no problem giving it like a freaking 100%. I don't care. Like I really don't. And so that's no, go ahead. You're good.
Well, that's what I was kind of saying with Sinners, is that like, you know, you're talking about cinematography, you talk about acting, all that. I feel like those parts of the movies were probably the strongest parts. The story itself wasn't really, at least for me, it just didn't hit that well, you know?
Right.
So, but that's what I'm saying. Like on a grand scale of like you said, you can watch a really bad movie, like straight to DVD quality. Like that's kind of what I would picture a, you know, true like 1 or 2 out of 10. But like you said, sometimes it does be like, you know, just how you felt about it. You know, if it was just a slog to get through. Like for example, I recently reviewed Dwayne Johnson's new movie, The Smashing Machine. I gave it a 2 out of 10 because I said this is a slog fest for me. I literally had to like almost skip through parts of the movie because it was like training sequences that were way too long, fight scenes that sucked. Just like someone disliked it, but you know what? Go screw yourself. But yeah, I'm right. But no, I'm. It's just more
Right.
like it's just that you know even though there was good parts of it, it was just like you said, just the feeling it left me with is just like this was a waste of time.
Right.
I wish I could not ever have gone through that.
I
So,
was
but yeah,
yeah, that's, for me, honestly, with Sinners, that's borderline where I was. I was just like, "I don't like this movie." Like,
yeah,
that's just where I left with it, and I'm like, "I get that people love it. I'm not gonna be like, oh, you're an idiot for thinking that this is good or have fun with it or what." It's not like that for me. Like, I'm just like, I did not enjoy this. I do not like how Ryan Coogler writes movies. I felt it to be like messy as far as how it was written and like the structure of it, and it just kind of meandered and seemed to just kind of be a little objectiveless at points, and like as far as not really having a clear objective as to trying to do too many things at once. And so certain things like that where I was just like, I left it and I'm just like, ugh. Like I just don't like, I never like, that's the other thing is it's like if I
hello, Lane, are we still here? Yo, chat, can you hear me?
to be what really
Yo,
is
Blaine.
oh, did I glitch out?
Yeah, you like
Okay.
froze. Okay.
I was curious if I did. So that, just note to everyone, we are in the middle of an absolute snowpocalypse right now. It is crazy. This is the most snow I've seen in this area since I was a kid. Um, so it is like I can't. Yeah, I don't know how many inches of snow we're at this point, but so if the power goes out or we lose internet, that's why, is because it's it's a lot of snow happening here.
Okay. But what were you saying before you froze up?
I'm trying to remember. Oh, I guess in a nutshell, for me, also, like if I leave a movie where I'm just like, I don't want to see it again, I don't want to talk about it. Honestly, don't even feel like reviewing it. That's when I'm like, okay, this needs to be low, even if it's well made, quote unquote. It needs to be low, and that's kind of how Sinners was for me.
Yeah, well, that's why I kind of struggle with this. Like I said, going back to Fantastic Four, it's like it's a well-made movie. It's
Mhm.
just that it didn't really hit for me. But I do think that like there was a lot of elements that deserve credit, like the cinematography, like some of the other like acting. But as a story, it just wasn't that great. So that's where I kind of sit with it sometimes. Like, how do I feel about it in terms of like, do I give it an 80? Do I give it a 90, 100, lower than that? You know, like what's the
Right.
differences in that like kind of small space, you know? Like
Right.
that's kind of where I sit
And
with it.
that is one of the things that I notice as our people start to get into the app and drill in and just start to use it more, is like their how they do that will evolve over time. And eventually, after you've done enough reviews, you'll be like, okay, this is my system. This is how I do
Mm,
this. And
yeah.
that tends to just kind of happen for everybody. And it definitely has for me as well. And I have a pretty like solid system now, um, where I kind of how I operate. And sometimes people will, you'll get crap because everybody's system is different, right? Like people will be like, "Oh man, how'd you do that?" And you're just like, "Well, I don't know. I didn't like it, or I had so much fun that I don't care about the flaws." And you just have to stick to your system. It's kind of like with Jaws, and I get crap for that, but um I've seen Jaws a bunch of times or multiple times over my life, and every time I just kind of like, this is a well-made movie, especially for when it came out. I appreciate it. I appreciate its space in cinema. Like I get why people love it 1000%. Like I am not saying that this is a bad movie. It's just that every time I see it, I'm just kind of eh, like, I don't know. Like I just it doesn't for whatever reason it just doesn't. I'm not big into shark movies either. They've just never done a
Yeah.
lot for me. I don't find it to be very scary. And so it doesn't really work as like a horror movie. And so there's like these major tenets of like what this movie sets out to do that it does not do for me. And so that's why I kind of land that way. So
Yeah.
I'll never live it down, but as I said in my review, I regret nothing. It did turn out to be a much bigger ordeal than I was expecting. I thought it was just going to be like a little joke, and then it spread like all over our side of the internet like wildfire. And all of a
114
sudden,
dislikes.
I don't have the most. Beardo passed me. Beardo passed me. So
Hey. But how do you feel about, let's take Jaws for example, or just any other old movie? How do you feel about like rating a movie that you've never seen before? You're watching it, and you can tell the effects. You know, probably for their day they were good, but now you're like, it's not like you can tell, especially with CGI. Like I feel like I was just watching, for example, and I reviewed it, Spider-Man, the first Tobey
right.
Maguire movie. Gave it an 85. I feel like it's a very solid movie, everything else, but it was made, well, came out 2002. The early 2000 CGI now, like I hate to say it, Lord of the Rings, and some other 2000s, like the CGI, you can kind of start to see, the little bit of aging. But let's take it back to
Right.
like Jaws or just any other old movies. Do you let that kind of impact in any way, or do you kind of just try to block it out and be like, that's what it was first time? It might, not look as great, but that's what they had at the time.
Yeah, I tend to lean towards what was appropriate for the time. It depends um, on how offensively bad it is,
Yeah,
or even if it's because sometimes you can tell like this was bad for the time, also, right? So that plays a factor. But like you said, with things like Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings, whatever, to me, it plays no real factor, right? Like I'm just
yeah,
kind of like, hey, it's a product of the time. I'm not gonna like ding it too hard for that. But the 2000s movies do tend to be the ones that if I am gonna ding something, it's for those because it's in that middle ground of it wasn't quite good enough yet, but like it's a gray area and of time in making movies. But also, though, I recently reviewed The Matrix, and it's like some of that, some of the CG's like, But also, I think what I'll take into consideration as well is like how much of an effort did they put into practical effects in certain areas.
yeah,
How much did they of an effort, did they put in to not just leaning on only special effects because that tends to be what hurts movies. Like with when they came out is honestly just the tech.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I try to not let the tech affect it too much because like they worked with what they had.
yeah. I do think though, like especially some of the older movies, I think they did a better job with what they had versus some like late 90s 2000. I think they were trying to play around too much with CGI and it just didn't really work because the technology wasn't really there, so sometimes it's a little glaring, but
Right.
like if what's that one movie with the aliens, something from Mars, what's
Oh,
they're like big
uh,
head, big
yeah, yeah,
brain.
yeah.
Like that's one example where it's
Mars
like,
Attacks.
maybe you pushed the maybe you pushed it a little bit too far with that. Maybe you should have waited.
Right. Right.
but uh
Exactly.
but yeah, like with some of these, I guess for you personally, kind of going
hmm
back to what I was just talking about, like how would you personally say, like, for example, right here, Master and Commander,
hmm
you gave this a 91. What's the
Yeah.
difference for you of like a 90 or like, mid 90s versus 100? Like what's that little bit of difference for you that's like makes that change?
Right. Typically, in all honesty, usually that has to do. There are usually one of two factors, and it's an enjoyment. Like
Mm,
literally, just like there was like a little bit of slow parts, or there was or there was just something that didn't grab me quite as well, or it's that I did ding it for like a few points for something like you know a certain character or how it was written or the acting or whatever. That tends to be what dings it in that really high range, is that like there's something that jumped out as like that could have been better, especially even at the time, like if it's an older movie or whatever. I'm like, even at the time, like they could have done
yeah,
this better.
yeah. Well, with that though, is like I totally forgot what I was gonna say. I
You're
had it
good.
and then it just disappeared. But
No, you're good.
no, it's like with with that though, Man, I had it. I like keeps popping in my head, and I just keep forgetting it.
It's
Oh
just
yeah,
can't
okay.
grab it.
Going back. Okay, I got it now. I got it now. Professional streamer, everybody.
Right,
Professional. All
right.
right. With that though, like you were talking about, sort of like the cinematography versus feeling, or like what you get out of it. What do you feel about? I can't remember the exact quote. Maybe I should look it up before I say something. But with I think it was Scorsese that was talking about the MCU movies and how
Right,
essentially they're not like real cinema sort of thing. Just to kind of you know
right.
what do you think about that sort of thing? Like, do you think there should be a more effort placed on the cinematography or like the true cinema, or should it just be like if you enjoy a movie, that's fine, even if it's the worst shot, worst whatever. Do
Right.
you think Scorsese's right on that, and that like things have to sort of fit this box of cinema for it to be sort of like revered as like some of the greatest films?
Right. No, I think that's bullshit, right? Because I mean, a lot of the films that a lot of these people think are some of the best films ever made are most people, your everyday person, you put it in front of them and they're like, "What is this shit? Like this is
Yeah,
boring." Or the topic is uninteresting. Or you look at like a lot of these movies that win the Oscars or the whatever. Even talking about recently, like with One Battle After Another, right? Where it's like I'm sure that someone like, "Oh, this is cinema." And I'm like, "No, it's freaking dog shit. Like it's not good. It's not like the movie is messy, whatever." And it's either that you guys hyped it up because it had the agenda you wanted, or yeah, okay, great. A movie can look wonderful and it be perfectly shot and framed and the acting can be on point and all of these things. But if it's boring, that does not make it good, right?
yeah,
You're missing the point. And that's the thing that's fine. Everything doesn't have to be for everyone. And I am someone who I am okay with that thought process, right? Where it's like now I do think that in the current day and age where we're at this point where they use that terminology oh, this wasn't made for you, right? But they use it in a way in which it's like typically in regard to politics or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, you made this like hyper targeted MCU show or movie that was catered towards people of color with disabilities and is far left and whatever. Like all of these check these boxes, and you're like, well, this wasn't for you. And I'm like, well, clearly, no shit, it wasn't for me. But like, what is the percentage of people you actually made this for, and how much money did you spend on it, and how much of your fan base did you lose? So like that's the thing, is I think it is fine to make things not necessarily for everyone, but you have to also know that you're taking a risk when you're doing that, and that there's going to be people that are going to think that it's shit, and you can't come after them for being like, you watched this thing that wasn't for you, and you're like, well, you put it out for everybody to watch, so I watched it,
yeah,
and I'm going to tell you, that it clearly wasn't for me. So, you can't judge people or blame them for it not working for them. But on the same hand, I think the medium is like art, right? It should be considered like art, and I think that there is all types of art for all types of people, and it's
yeah,
just a
yeah,
matter of where you're aiming it. Where it's kind of like the guy that just recently did that new movie Mercy with Chris Pratt. You actually edited my video, and I kind of
yeah,
point that out. Where I'm like, his movies are kind of what like some people would consider slop type movies, because he's just like entertainment focused. He's like, I am not trying to make high art. I'm trying to have you have fun while you're in the movie theater or while you're at home or wherever. He made Wanted, and a lot of people love that movie. There's a lot of cinephiles that would be like, "Oh, this is trash. I'm too pretentious for this film." But
yeah,
your everyday person's going to be like, "I had a blast." So
yeah. Well,
I
that's what I was kind of getting into, is like I don't really like that, because I'm not really too big into movies. Like, if you ask me my top 10, I don't really have like these, uh crazy, cinematic, they're pretty simple movies. But
right,
people will be like, well, you're not a real, movie fan, you're not, a student of the game. But like you said,
right,
it's more subjective. Like you said, it's art. It's, whatever
right,
speaks to you speaks to you. But a lot of these people that are into the quote unquote like cinema and all that sort of stuff, they make it seem like they're better than you because they enjoy this because of, all these angles, these shots, the this, the that. It's like, if it's not entertaining, then what does it? If you don't, my two things with movies, if it's not entertaining or if you don't gain something from it, like a lesson or something, then like what's the point? Like what are we doing at that point? It's like
Right.
either you entertain or you try to get a good message across. Otherwise, it's like maybe it's just not for me, or maybe you just did a poor job of making something that
Right.
does that.
Right. Yeah. And quite often it's one or both. That's the thing where I think places like Criticless are important because it's especially even like our friends with benefits feature. That's why I made that. Is it's like you have a specific feature in here where the people that you agree with, the people that you align with, you lump them into your friends with benefits, and you're like, even if all of Criticless disagrees with me, I know that I had this friends with benefits score here of people that I typically align with and think similarly to, and then you can you just go to your friends with benefits score and be like, because quite often for me, even our audience score will be at like a decent, and then I'll go to my friends with benefits and it is a most excellent, and I'm like, oh shit, okay, so I probably would like this, and then I go see it and I do like it. So it's it's good to find people that you align with and that you think similarly with, and then you can go on like Criticless and you can just say you can be a lot more particular with what you watch, and you
Yeah,
can because there is a lot of crap out there and there's a lot of stuff catered to different types of people with different interests, and this way you can avoid it and not waste your time, because that is the thing, is especially with like a TV show, it's an investment with your time, and
yeah,
you don't want to watch something you're going to hate. So it's better to create these little communities of people that you tend to agree with. And then you're like, okay, this is worth taking the risk. Like I recently dropped my review for Landman. Everybody is loving Landman. And I had someone in the comments pop in and be like, man, like you and a whole lot of other people I tend to align with and agree with, everybody's saying that this is great. Like I normally don't even watch many TV shows, but I think I'm going to check this out. And I think that's important. That's a cool, you know, byproduct of having a place like this.
yeah. Well, let's see. Boomer says, comes down to the story. Good, compelling story draws you in, gives you characters you want to know more, care about. That's the thing too. Is like with a lot of those cinematic movies, or even not just that, just a lot of these movies in general over the past couple of years, they seem to have forgotten how to like, make compelling characters. That you can actually connect with. Like I said, with Fantastic Four, my problem is like, you know, after being like around the MCU for so long, you hear about, Reed Richards this, Reed Richards that. And so I'm like, okay, I kind of want to know a little bit about this character, at least, in the MCU. You watch the movie and like you get nothing of who he is outside of just, I'm brilliant and I'm going to devise a plan to save the world. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like, just a lot of movies recently, they just don't really invest too much in, well, both the story and the character, but definitely not the
Right.
characters either. It's like how many of these, whether superhero movies or just movies in general, so you hear about, characters that people really resonate with, in comparison to like the past 20 years, all these different
Right.
movies and characters.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yeah, it's been a mess this past, and that was really what lit the fire under my butt is, to really jump in and do this. Now, granted, I had to be in the right scenario where we could even afford to do something like this, because it is such an investment, and people don't even really understand or realize like what level of investment and money and time and everything goes into something like this, because it's unbelievably like astronomical, honestly, and it was way more than I
Yeah,
thought it was going to be even getting into it. Um, but it what really lit the fire in my butt was watching all of our entertainment just go off a cliff, and watching the entire entertainment industry, not just movies and TV shows, but books and video games and music and everything just get absolutely infiltrated by political activists that do not care about the audience, that are literally telling people like, don't watch what I make, don't, whatever. And it's just like, what business do you think that you are in? Like like this is entertainment, and a lot of these things are expensive to make. It's a big investment. It is a risk, and in doing what you guys have done, you are literally capsizing multiple industries at this point simply to progress what you think is like a noble political agenda. And it's like, wow, like you would rather bludgeon people to death with political messaging and agendas and self insertions into media where the writers are just making the characters into versions of themselves and stupid shit like this that like used to not be a thing.
Yeah,
You're willing to risk your entire industry for this shit. Like that is just baffling to me. That that
yeah.
that and clearly they're paying the cost. They're paying the price now.
Yeah. Well, that's a big thing too. Is like I was kind of saying, all these movies of the past 5 years, but specifically, like you were saying, a lot of these big studios. Let's take like Star Wars for example. It came out how they spent so much money making the sequels, and they basically made almost nothing or lost money on the sequels, right? And to at the same time tanking their whole franchise. And like you're saying though, like who do they think they are? Well, I think it comes down to like they felt like for the past 5 years they could make anything and people would just eat it up, you know?
Right.
And pretty much the masses said like, no, I don't want to watch this. I'm no longer checking out your new, Star Wars shows anymore, your Star Wars movies, your Marvel stuff. I'm checked out because you're making stuff that's no longer for the people that want to watch that stuff or have been invested. You're trying to make it for someone else that's not even interested, so now you've gotten rid of the people that liked it, and the people you're trying to make it for don't even want it. So it's like you basically shoved away everybody and now you're left with a dead franchise.
Right, right. It's kind of baffling, honestly, to see it happen. And I honestly didn't think it would get this far. I thought that they would pick up on it, but that's the problem with a place like Hollywood, right? I think that these people have been stuck in an echo chamber where they're only around people that do and say and think the same things. And also with the current kind of political landscape, it's become to where you're not even really safe to admit if you're of a different political opinion. And quite often, it's not even like it doesn't even have to be that drastically different, but it's become so polarized that it's like I can't like a lot of these people probably can't even express if they're just slightly different on a single issue, right? And so
Yeah,
it's just become this giant echo chamber where all of Hollywood is kind of just became the same thing, and they thought that the rest of the world just agreed with them, that the rest of the world just thought the same, and it's like y'all are idiots. Like you were just not read the room. Maybe leave Hollywood. Maybe leave California for a little bit or New York or these places and like talk to people, meet people. Realize that a lot of people think very differently than you, and a lot of people that you were painting out to be just borderline evil um are good people.
yeah. Well, that's the thing too is with the whole audience thing, I don't even think that it's necessarily like they're trying to, make it for a certain political audience. I think there's also a large part of it that they want as many people as they can because they're thinking like, oh, we can just make all the money if we get more people involved. So then they kind of, whether it's, certain franchises or, there's plenty of games out there, plenty of other things where, that have released in the past 5 years that they make it so generic that it's like it's made for everybody, but at the same time it's made for
Made
nobody,
for nobody. Yep.
so it's
Yep.
like you end up having no identity, nothing that people can really hang on to, and so then it's just forgotten. And I think that's a big
Right.
thing too, is that like people, well, originality, it's a big thing of that. Now there's
Mhm.
remakes, reboots of everything because they can't come up with anything. But it's also just that they want to play it safe. They want to try to get as much of the market as they can, but they end up coming up with nothing that people really want to stick onto because it's just, so generic and so bland. It's like with food, you got people that like spicy stuff, you got people that like all types of different flavors. So those people go to, eat those type of foods. But if you just make some, hey, let's have mashed potatoes, you're not really going to sell that well.
That's right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It is it's just kind of become this weird phenomenon that I don't, like I said, I don't think many of us really thought that it would go this far. And I think that this is also like what you were just talking about is a byproduct of when you enter a time and a space where everything is controversial. So, it's either that quite often they're going one route, which is just to offend everyone on one political side, or just everyone, I mean, let's be honest, everyone not left identifying, just go ahead and just forget all of those people. Or they go the route where they're having to create something that doesn't offend a group that is offended by quite literally everything. And so, like you said, it then just becomes something for no one.
Yeah. But I guess moving on though is like with you being the CEO of Criticless, I always heard, for, past 10 plus years, everybody's like, "Oh, I want to be a CEO. I want to be a CEO." For you, what does a CEO actually mean?
Right. Well, that's the thing. So for me, honestly, and we've talked about this, my wife and I, and because I mean, she is, fully endorsed to this whole project, and I would have never done this if she wasn't on board, and as she stays involved with the company. But for me, it's kind of you got to become a jack of all trades. I am now a YouTuber, a marketer, a someone who moderates the site, someone who has to use social media, who has to do a little bit of everything. You become a jack of all trades, and that is the thing with a small company. Is that you have to kind of be a jack of all trades. You have to be okay sitting down and doing doing the finances. You have to be okay with dealing with government regulation and learning it. You have to deal with talking to lawyers. You got to do a lot of shit you don't like and don't want to do, or at least me personally. Some people might like to have to be a jack of all trades. It's like I've learned how to use all kinds of different computer programs and softwares and you name it over the past couple of years. And that is the thing is with owning a small business and being a CEO and an entrepreneur, you have to kind of be able to do all sorts of things. And you have to be able to do things like this where you're like comfortable going and talking in front of a bunch of people or being on camera or you have to be okay with doing all of these things. Now for me down the road, I would not be surprised. Quite often you see people in a similar space as me where like they become more known as like the founder, right? And they're not getting into the weeds of the business side of things as far as like I said, when you're dealing with accounting and you're dealing with all that, and you're just someone
Yeah.
who promotes the company, makes decisions involving like new developments and what's going to be created and designed and where my heart actually is, and the people side of things and making a product that people want to use and that people like. If when we get to that size, I would probably have someone that ran more of the nitty-gritty day-to-day operations and made sure that we're, like I said, not getting outside of government regulations and not pissing off Australia or crazy shit like that I have to worry about every day that sucks. It absolutely sucks, man. I hate it. And all of that people don't realize goes into this is very complicated. And that's why you quite often see people like me, once the company gets big enough, pivoting into a kind of a different type of a role where they're not doing the CEO thing, right?
So once you get big enough, you're gonna make me the CEO, right?
Right. I'm gonna need a resume here, High Tide. We're gonna have to really dig into that.
You know I'm qualified.
That's
You
right.
know, yeah.
Completely
You got
qualified.
my resume right there. You see, I went
Right.
to
Right.
Ball So Hard University. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
Yeah. I spent
got
some
my
time there. Yeah.
doctorate. So, but
Yeah. Yeah.
no, see, mashed potatoes. What I meant by mashed potatoes is like nothing on it, just straight, just mashed
Right.
potatoes, nothing, right? So
You're right. No
basically,
gravy.
yeah, nothing, no flavor, just the
Right.
potato. But no, going back to kind of what you're saying though, what do you think is like one or maybe multiple of the most important lessons you've learned throughout your journey of creating this company or being a CEO and running this company?
Now, say that again. Sorry, I missed the first part of
What do
that.
you what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from
Mm.
being a CEO of the company?
Okay. You have to always think multiple steps ahead. And that is huge. You have to kind of prepare and predict for just about anything to happen, and look at you have to look forward far enough that you see, like, if X then Y, and really look out, look forward to what could potentially happen. And I did a lot of that, and I still get caught off guard all the time.
Yeah.
There are things that, like I said, quite often it has to do with government regulations and things like that. Is because these things are constantly changing and evolving, and you don't know what they're going to do next necessarily. And so you have to try your best to predict it and get in front of it. And so that's the thing, is always kind of being on top of the news and the changing business environments and the expectations for companies. All of that is absolutely key. The other thing is to plan for multiple directions, right? It's you don't just say, like, this is my goal and that's where I'm going and I'm going to take a straight line there. You have to plan for multiple paths to get to that goal, because if you don't, there's a good chance that the one path that you were aiming for gets shut off, and then you have to start planning all over again. And I know that I don't know how nebulous that sounds, but
Yeah.
it's really, you have to you have to plan for any possible outcome. And so it does become difficult to, because once one door closes, you do have to have other doors planned out, I guess, is the best way to put it. And we've run into that more early on in the company. It wasn't as big of a deal, but now that we're getting bigger and we're dealing with, um, a lot of different ways that we could grow, and a lot of different roadblocks that could get in our way with government regulation and things like that. I have to constantly be thinking about other ways to grow, other ways to monetize, other ways to, um, just keep the company profitable, keep the company successful, and get the company in front of the right people.
Yeah. Well, what would you say for like those who maybe want to start a small business? Like, what would you say is the best steps to, taking that idea and trying to make that a reality?
I'm always the type of person that has say, like, try to go for it. Like, I am not someone who wants a bunch of regrets. Obviously, taking this risk with Criticless is the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life, and I can't imagine taking one bigger, honestly. But it's every person is different, but you do have to. The number one thing to know is, if you are wanting to be an entrepreneur, you have to be okay eating shit for a little while. 9 times out of 10, it is going to be hard as hell. It's going to be a grind. It is going to be a struggle. You are going to knock on every door possible. You're going to, and obviously every business is different. And some are going to be harder than others, but you still have to be okay with taking risks and putting yourself out there and making yourself uncomfortable. And you have to, it's gonna, it's likely going to cost you money in some type of way to take a risk in starting up a business. But not only is it going to cost you money, it's going to cost you a lot of time. It's going to cost you sanity. It's but I think that that's all part and parcel, right? Like, if it comes too easy, then it's probably too good to be true, right? And I think also, I heard someone say recently, it was actually our pastor, actually, he was talking about things like this, and he was like, I've started to become weary of companies that take off too fast and are instantly, like, hyper successful, because
Yeah.
there's usually something else there that you should be concerned about.
Yeah.
And that is something this is my third business. I have been, even though I've not been in tech, I ran a trucking company. I ran a lawn care company, and now I've done this. And all of them have been hard. They haven't, and there are plenty of times when it's not fun, but the reward is where it's worth it. And whether that be monetarily or just in the success of whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Well, Randall here brought up a
Mhm.
good point that I was kind of thinking about, and you sort of did touch on it.
Mhm.
With cash flow, like, I know it depends business to business and everything, but would you say that's like a pretty big aspect of getting it off the ground? Is like, you really got to factor in like you said, let's take for yours, however much it was
Mhm.
to get a dev team, to hire, however many people, that necessary around that like, would you say that's probably the biggest barrier to entry too for most people, is getting the cash
1000%.
flow necessary? Yeah.
Yes, 1000%. It is, unless you are doing something like starting a landscaping company or something along those lines where you can come in and you're like, I don't care. I'm going to start out with a freaking push mower and whatever, right? Like, and I'm just going to
Yeah.
throw it in the back of a car and I'm going to mow people's lawns until I make enough money to buy a bigger, that kind of thing where you can scale.
Yeah.
It tends to be blue collar businesses like that are easier to grow without capital. But most businesses, you have to have cash flow to some degree to be able to get going. Where it's like, even when I started my trucking company, before I started dispatching drivers and things were, you know, bigger, it was a matter of, you have to at least be able to like get a loan to buy a truck or whatever, you have, and quite often though, people don't realize it's really hard to even just get a loan. Like to build a business like what I'm building, you're going to have to get funding not from a bank. It's going to have to be from someone who believes in what you're doing. So that's the other thing that you need to know, is to have a business plan lined out, to know how you're going to scale it, to know the risks involved, and to be able to sell your idea if you don't already have that cash flow.
Yeah. Well, it sort of goes back to what I said earlier. You know, how would you say, I know I sort of asked this, but I guess try to rephrase it, like with taking the loans or just anything else into consideration, what would you say would be like, let's say I have an idea for a business, I got to take out, I don't know, let's just throw a number, 100,000, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
What would you say would be like the kind of X factor of go for it, or maybe just sit on it, try to maybe get some money elsewhere, do some other things before you start it, or, hey, you got to go for it, take that loan, go for it. Like, what would you say the biggest thing is? Would it be like, try to find how much money you're going to be making, which I get to, it's kind of a little bit harder since you don't really know since you're getting into it. But what would you say is like the biggest factor of like, go for it, take out the loans or whatever, or, kind of sit on it for a while?
Right. I'd say, it does depend on the business type, and it depends on, how much investment you're needing. But the big thing would be, can you, with that, let's say it's like 100 grand that you can get, for doing this. I would make sure it's like, how long can you keep yourself afloat for with not being financially, you know, profitable? Um,
Yeah.
off of that money, right? Where it's like, okay, well, you can get 100, but you really only need 50 to start the business, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, well, you've got a runway of keeping the company alive for X amount of time, right? Where it's like, since starting Criticless, like I've not made any money. Like we've, personally, like I don't take a salary. We don't,
Yeah.
it just all goes back into the company. And that's one of the things you have to be okay with. So I see a lot of people in this space that do things like this. Typically, it works well if you're married and you have a spouse or somebody where you can deal with, so that the whole weight doesn't fall on you of trying to keep it alive and growing while also trying to survive as a person. You know what I mean? Like keep paying
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
bills and your things. So that's the thing, is like, even with Criticless, I sat on this for years and years and years. We ended up selling our house to build Criticless. We had
Dang.
built, yeah, we sold our house, and now I will say we did part and parcel with that. We ended up inheriting my grandparents in law's house. And so we moved into
Mm.
that house and sold our brand new house that we had just built. And that was the house that built Criticless, right? And so, that was one of those things where we had to be okay taking that risk. But also, we were in a scenario where we're like, okay, well, we can cut a mortgage, we can make money on selling this house, and that goes to building this thing.
Yeah.
So
Now,
so there are a lot of factors at play with doing something like this. Like I said, I always tell people to go for your dreams, but also don't be stupid. Like, if you're gonna lose every last cent and then also be homeless by trying to pull this off, potentially,
yeah.
like, probably don't do it.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that, have you had any like bad business dealings? Now, you don't have to like get into, details
Right.
of whatever, but like, have you had any like, one thing I've always heard growing up is don't do business with friends. For some reason, like that's what I heard from
Right.
close family members is like, hey, don't do it because, things can happen and, no longer friends or maybe you trust them too much. Have you had anything
Right.
like that or just any like bad business dealings with people that you might have trusted too much?
Not really. We've been pretty careful, but I will say that that is a big factor, because you'll hear both sides of things. Where you'll hear someone say, "Do if you have someone that you know that you can trust 100%, then do work with them, do business with them, right?
Yeah,
Because you can trust them, and it is hard to find people to trust because you could put your trust in some random person and then them not have anything on the line and them stab you in the back or whatever."
yeah,
But on the same hand, you have to be 100% sure that you trust that person, right? And
yeah.
even then, you could still be wrong. So luckily, we've been pretty smart about how we handle things, but also we've had very few people involved in Criticless. It's been a very small operation from start to finish, and luckily, with the growth of it, I was relying on word of mouth, and I've done all the marketing, and I've made the connections and the friends and whatever, and we found a lot of people like Jay, Drunk 3PO, or Beardo, or all of the Geeks and Gamers people, and even people outside of that, like with Chris Gore with Film Threat, and just these different people, right, that like believe in what I'm doing and wanted to support it. So that's the thing, is finding the right people that believe in what you're doing. It's not necessarily even about just like the friends. It's about finding people that truly believe in you and what you're doing and trust in you and want to help you, and if you can find people that are willing to help you with no strings attached. And that can be very hard to do, but those people are likely going to be the people that you can trust the most.
Wait, did you say Frank Gore or is Boomer just me because he says
No,
Frank Gore, nice guy, like
Frank Gore.
the
No,
running
Chris
back?
Gore.
Did you?
Chris Gore. No,
Okay,
Chris Gore. Chris
it's
Gore,
like,
not Frank Gore.
well, I guess speaking to that though, like I don't know if you necessarily were involved in the like I don't know if you hired people or employees, but like if you were and you have employees, how would you say like you vetted them to make sure they were the right fit? Like kind of walk me through that process because I've never been through that, but just kind of wondering like
Right.
how would you say someone would be a good employee or a good fit for a certain job?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is very multifaceted, but I think one of the things that is key is, like I said a minute ago, which is make sure that they believe in what you're doing, especially as a small company or business, is like make sure they believe in it and that they are motivated and invested in the success of what you are doing. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have somebody that's truly invested and believes in it, then they don't care about taking risks with what you have, right?
Yeah,
Because especially when you're small, they're the weight is only falling on a couple people. So that is a big important thing to keep in mind. Is just that they want to see it succeed. They understand what you're trying to achieve. But then also just that they do meet the skill sets, as a small company, that is the biggest thing, and something that I kind of have to keep in mind now is really when you're small, you have to have people that are very much, not even a little bit, like very much jacks of all trade. Like,
mhm.
or you have to be that yourself because you quite often don't have an infinite budget to just pay all these specialized people. You need to find people that are good at a lot of things, even if they're not the best. You need to find people that have a variety of skill sets.
Yeah. You'd rather have someone that's good at a lot of things than just great at one.
Yes, absolutely, 1000%. And if they aren't, that they learn quickly. And yes,
Sean
I
is
am.
worried for your well-being.
I know. Yeah, I almost here. Check this out. I don't know if y'all can see it. We'll see if I can show you. Nope, it's just going to look completely white. Well, that is what it looks like outside. It's completely white. There is just there's so much snow. It's outrageous. I have one car that's outside right now, and it's like freaking this deep on the car. Like it's nuts, and that is not typical weather for us here. So
See, now Sean's just trying to deny it, but We all
No,
know
I know.
he cares for you. He's
Yeah,
looking
I
out for you.
appreciate it. Yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. Yeah. No. Well, and also the minutes before I actually came on the show, I went out in that in my car. We found out that the local grocery store was open. That's the other big thing around here is when they make when the news comes out and says that it's going to snow and different things, we're like, bullshit. Y'all lie every time. You're always wrong. And so I didn't believe it was going to happen. And then I was like, oh no, we need groceries. And so right
Dang.
before I came on, and we went out and got dog food and such. So and it was I was like sliding around on the road, and I'm like, oh man, this might have not been the best idea, but as it
Well,
goes.
Boomer is calling us out, or you out, really.
Yeah,
Jill of all
right.
trades. Come on.
That's right. That's right.
What are you
Got to be
doing here?
politically correct these days.
Right.
Of course, a
Come
Jill of all
on.
trades.
Trying to get us canceled.
I know. I know. Oh, believe me, I'm on shows with Beardo. If I'm gonna get canceled, it's gonna. It's. I'm toast. I am
Yeah.
toast.
Well, going back to movies, I mean, this
Mhm.
kind of, I guess, walk through different parts of your life, but let's say for your childhood or teenage years, what were some of the movies that you sort of grew up on or had like the most impact on you during that time?
Oh man, young when I was young, it was things like Goonies, a lot of those 80s staples of 80s, 90s, films like Jurassic Park, Star Wars, um, those Back to the Future, those pop culture things. But really, when I became big into like movies and TV and really dug in was in my high school years. I had a buddy
Mm,
who's now actually an actor. He's was huge into it and was like a big. He just loved all movies and was super passionate about it. Knew every director and this person was involved and this person produced it and just all of that. And
yeah.
he made me passionate about it and made me care. And actually, during the time, movie stores were still around. And one of the big local movie stores was Hollywood Video. It
Yeah.
was it was right there when it was kind of on the tail end technically of video stores, but during my like formative high school years, they were still going strong. And one of the things that they implemented was it was almost kind of like a Netflixy type model of where you could pay a monthly fee and you could rent like X number of movies at a time. And so you could go to
Yeah.
Hollywood Video and you could go and rent like three things. And as long as you brought them back, you could just get more out. And so my parents I think paid for that, or maybe we split it, or I don't know. But we that was when I became really big into it because I could just, I got my license. I could drive down to the video store. Even a little bit before that, I could get my parents to drive me down there, and I would just rent all kinds of stuff. And I would watch these weird indies. The 2000s or the early 2000s was a great time for indie film and film in general because we weren't dealing with all this woke stuff. There was just seemed to be a lot of money being thrown around on creative just making weird shit and people taking risks in the industry.
Yeah.
And so I watched so much stuff, and even TV was getting good. We were kind of getting into that like peak TV era. So it was a lot of these. I was starting to just see these really cool films that even quite often had big name stars that like, but nobody saw it because it was this weird indie where it's like movies like I'm trying to think. Even like Layer Cake or Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Sunshine, Green Street Hooligans, these movies that now are becoming like these cult classics, but nobody
Yeah.
knew about at the time. And so
Mm,
I was discovering all of these just more movies on the fringes and was like, holy shit, like movies can be so different than just the normal stuff that everybody's going to see in the movie theater. And it was before streaming went through an age where streaming was like really really good, and now we're dealing with the aftermath of it getting worse and whatever. So
yeah.
like I've been right in this age bracket of like watching the industry change so drastically. But some of those movies that I rattled off just a minute ago were the real like fundamental ones, and like 30 Days of Night or Donnie Darko, um even like starting to get into slightly more newer films, but it's like Scott Pilgrim and things like that that were kind of more formative for me as far as like the creative risks that these directors and stuff would take to make just these really cool movies that seem to be more niche and we don't see the industry taking risks like that anymore.
That's actually true. Is like I remember at least the most recent one I can think of is I forgot what movie me and my friends went to go see, but I saw an ad for everywhere no what's it called? Everything Everywhere All at
Everywhere
Once,
all at
right?
once.
And I
Yeah.
was like, this is so different. I want to go see
Hmm.
that. And so we went
Right.
saw it. I was like, this is really good, this is really
Right.
interesting, but you just don't see too many of those movies anymore. I feel like A24 is like kind of known for being one of the last studios to like really be trying to like do different things like that. But yeah,
Hmm.
most definitely is like people even
Yeah.
talk about comedies, like the 2000s comedies that's pretty much
Oh,
dead. And yeah,
dude. Yeah.
speaking of that
2000s were
too,
peak.
I was watching like I said Spider-Man the other day. He said in the movie to what's his name, Bonesaw or whatever, he's like,
Hmm.
nice outfit, did your husband make that for you? I was like, that would
Right.
not fly nowadays.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Everybody's being so careful, right? Like they're afraid to offend anyone. They're afraid to tell a joke. They're afraid of getting canceled, and it's done an absolute number on entertainment. And there are a few people taking that level of risk now. And I am curious. There's another one, like you were talking about, Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's a film coming out. Actually, in like a week or two, Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, which is Gore Verbinski, the guy who did the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but it looks more in the vein of Everything Everywhere All at Once, just super weird, over the top. And the thing was, he completely self-funded this film. Like no studios were trying to get involved with it. He ended up having to sell it to a studio, and now everyone's saying that like it's going to be movie of the year and that it's absolutely phenomenal. So I'm hoping that taking risks and making creative individual like standout films is going to be in vogue again, and we're going to start to see more of that kind of thing. I'm really hoping that's where we're headed.
Yeah, well, like I said, it seems like A24 is like the last
Hmm.
one because
Neon is as
there's
well.
yeah, because there was another movie I didn't really like it that much, but it was what's it called, Marcel the Shell or something like that.
Yeah,
I didn't really
yeah,
like that movie, but at least it was different. It tried something different, stuff like
yep,
that. It's like it's interesting to like see
right,
people try stuff instead of let's make the Mummy 4. We're bringing back the old cast. You guys remember that? It might be
right.
30 years later, and they're in their 50s, but you know what? Come back and see our movie, please.
Nostalgia is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
It really is, and that is the thing. Is hopefully between A24, Neon, there's a couple others like Bleecker Street, Focus Features, Annapurna, like some of these other studios that are doing things a little more risky, but it is. I don't know. We're starting to see smaller things succeed. It's like even this weekend, and I saw it last night. We've got a new film out by Sam Raimi, and it's an individual. It's a new like original idea, where it's kind of like the old movie Misery mixed with Castaway, and
Mm.
it's a weird kind of wacky movie, and I think it's going to do well. And so I'm hoping that with the success of smaller budget films that are hitting the theater, that are still doing well because they're creative and weird and interesting or whatever, I'm hoping that these other big studios are starting to take note and be like, this is maybe we should just do that. We should make movies for a little bit cheaper and like just take a risk. But we'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, now that you mentioned that, kind of made me think of something with sort of the slow death of the like regular movie theaters. Do you think that plays a big part in, you know, these movie theaters or sorry, these movie studios taking it safe in that, they're making less and less money off of their big name stuff anyway, and that could be due to a number of things, but I'm sure that it makes an impact on every movie that people probably just aren't going to see many movies anymore outside of the big, blockbuster. So when they do put out something and maybe it doesn't do so well, that they take that as a sign of let's not try this again because people don't like it, even though it's more so just the movie theaters just aren't really that big anymore. You know what I mean? So they're not going to
Right.
try to risk anything unless it is that big blockbuster, Avengers Doomsday, that sort of thing. You think that's sort of the way we're going with the big
It
studios?
could it could be, and we could be watching movie theaters becoming more of like a niche market, right? Almost like records or something. Like
Yeah.
It's a more niche thing that people, there's a market for it, and there's a very passionate group of people that still enjoy it and love it and do it. But we might just see less movie theaters. Um, you might only see them in like bigger cities, things like that, or nearby bigger place locations, and harder to find. I hope that
Mhm.
that's not the case. As we've seen, the industry always takes the wrong notes. Like that, they don't learn in the way
Yeah.
that you would think that they should, and they don't really seem to grasp success properly. And quite often, it's like something can make money, but they're like, "Well, it didn't make however $1 billion, so it's a failure." And you're just like,
Yeah.
"What? Like, what are we doing? Like, everything can't be Avengers Endgame." Um,
Right. Right.
so I honestly think that it's really in the industry's hands as far as where this goes, and them learning what needs to go to streaming, what needs to go to theaters, how to market things. They've got a lot of learning to do, and they've got to do it fast before the theaters die, because they
Yeah.
are going to be the ones to blame at the end of the day as to how they handle this. So we'll see. And also, there's stuff like this Warner Brothers deal and Warner Brothers buying, with them looking like they're going to get bought by Netflix, and like what Netflix does with one of the biggest entertainment companies in the industry. And so there's a lot of factors at play, and if we're going to keep letting these kind of monopolies happen even though they're not supposed to, because we're watching the industry shrink, or if there's going to be kind of a counter industry pop out, and these other possible avenues. And I don't know if that's going to happen or be successful. You have to have people with money that are willing to invest and also take risks. And quite often, um, there's a lot of people that put in a lot of lip service about wanting to make a change and make a difference and make things better. But then at the end of the day, when it comes to writing the check, they don't do it.
Yeah. Well, do you think there's a like money to really be made in streaming? Because the big thing that I've seen is like Netflix is so in the red year after year. All these streaming services, they're just bleeding money, and if the theaters aren't there for them to make money, do you think, like I said, do you think that just makes them more kind of shell up and just be like, we're just gonna focus on continuing to make these remakes, anything that we know is gonna make us money versus, anything we gotta take a risk on, put, 50 million into, and, maybe only get 10 of that back, you know, that sort of
Right.
thing. Cause I don't know about streaming, but I don't think the studios make that much off of putting their movies on streaming. I could be wrong, but
It's weird, right? Because it's all a numbers game, and most of these companies don't want to look like they're super profitable quite often. And also, it seems to be that like Netflix and some of these companies, they're really bad about learning uh, how to budget these projects and really where to put the money in the right ways.
yeah.
I think that streaming definitely can be profitable. I think that they are just making a lot of bad decisions right now, and also with them, the onus is on them to start to figure out how to spend their money properly. And if they're just trying to make it look like maybe the money isn't quite what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because there's a lot of that at play with big companies, and so
yeah,
I really don't know where the future of all this stuff is. I know that it seems like, at least to some degree, Trump is trying to save the entertainment industry. I've been hearing that he's been like, apparently they've been like showing movies at like actually on site at the White House and weird things, and like bringing in industry people and like trying to work with some of them. And he did this thing where he's partnered up with Stallone and several others for like, this group of Hollywood celebrities that are trying to help bring back the industry, and working on how to deal with funding, because that's the problem with the industry as well, is that they've started taking a lot of the filming and stuff out of the country, and it's caused a lot of issues. They've almost completely collapsed the filming industry in Georgia. It had gotten really big in Atlanta, and they've made a huge mistake by sending it overseas. And then now we're at a point where Georgia, which had become huge because of Marvel and DC, or I mean, not Marvel and Disney and stuff, they've now made
yeah.
it to where like nobody can work. And so I'm hoping that Trump can figure out some ways, and with work with some of these executive stuff to bring the actual production back over here.
I want to highlight a few comments.
Mhm.
First off, appreciate the subscription. I don't know about the second half of this comment, but I guess that
Um,
doesn't concern me.
it's listen, Subtle is he's my own personal troll. He whether criticless or around the YouTube sphere, he likes to get my goat. And it wasn't baby oil, all right, Subtle. It was real, actual oil that I was involved with. Motor oil, manly
Yeah,
oil, not baby.
no
I'm not
Diddy
freaking
stuff.
Diddy. Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I which I told the story on Bro Science. I told it on Criticless Cast this past week. But yeah, I had to carry a bunch of motor oil on ice and
Yeah.
ate it. And so yes, that's where that comes from. Thanks for that, Subtle.
And this kind of is what we were talking about, though. Boomer says, "Does anybody think theaters could make a healthy profit reshowing older movies that maybe never had a chance to see in theaters? Even the best home theater could not quite be the same." Well, I think they've sort of done that with some of the Star Wars movies, and then they just
Mhm.
did it with Lord of the Rings. I think there is somewhat of a market for it,
Oh,
but
there
I
is.
think what Karen was saying right here, I think people are more comfortable staying at home to watch movies. I think that's the big thing is like, why go to the theater, drive there, however much gas that is. And then once you get there, the ticket's going to be, 10 plus wherever you live, depends. And then, if you want to get popcorn, this, that, you're ending up spending, 20, 30 plus dollars, even just by yourself versus you stay at home. You can either just rent the movie, get it on streaming, you can have all the snacks you want and not as not close to what the theaters are charging. So it's like, what's the only upside to going is that theater experience, and how much people value that, I'm not sure. I'm kind of
Right, yeah.
curious if like, did those reshowings of any of those old movies do well? You know?
Some of them did phenomenal, like really, really well. It depends on the movie, depends on what it is,
Yeah,
but like some of them have done so well that they're beating new movies in the theaters, which is wild.
yeah,
And but also makes sense. So I think the thing is, it does make sense that people are like, hey, it needs to be like spectacle to some degree, right? Or it has to be,
yeah,
I think the bigger thing is it has to be a new experience, right? It
yeah,
has to be something interesting enough to make them want to go. Like what I mentioned with that Send Help movie. It looked weird. It looked interesting. It was Sam Raimi back. Um, and my theater and multiple other theaters where I was were sold out showings last night for this smaller kind of horror adjacent horror comedy movie, and that's huge for them to be selling out. As and even like the premium formats, like I was in a Dolby theater where every seat was full, and that's super
nice.
cool. um
Yeah,
and it's good to see, but I think that that's the other thing is that the movie, like the industry needs to be okay with being like scarcity, right? They need to be like, it's not going to be on streaming. If you want to see this and if you don't want it spoiled, you have to go to the theater. And then after it is in the theater, you might have to wait several months before you get the chance to see it. That's the thing is you can't really give people the option. If you say, well, we're launching day and date on HBO, and be like, I'm going to watch it at home.
yeah.
Like,
Well, that's how it kind of
but
was during the 2020,
yeah,
2021, where it's like everything. I mean, most theaters weren't open, but even when theaters did reopen, everything was still basically like, we're gonna release it digital day one,
yep,
you know. And two, I think what you just said made me think of it. The release windows of like when a movie would be in theaters used to be a lot longer. Now it seems like it's only about like 2 or 3 months before it goes on to digital. So I
yep.
think you're kind of
That,
right that like they have
that
to force it to be more like you have to go to the theater.
Yeah, you can't give people the option, right? That's the
Yeah.
thing. And to a degree, yeah, it kind of sucks for the consumer in kind of a way if you've gotten used to being like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to watch it at home." But
Yeah.
if you take away that option and you're like, "Well, I got to go to the theater." That's the thing where like for me and I know a lot of other people where it's like if here's the thing. If they're putting out good stuff, if the quality is high and you give them a reason to go, they're going to be a lot more apt to do it, right? So if the quality gets better, then signing up for something like Stubbs A List, for example, like the AMC does, where it's like I pay $25 a month and I can see 3 movies a week in any format I want for
Yeah.
that price. That's just as good or better than a lot of these streaming platforms are, right? So it's like, hey, I can see any new movie I want that's out, and quite often they're releasing old movies in the theater. I can go see it in Dolby or IMAX for no extra cost, and it's only $25 a month. That is worth it if you're
Yeah.
having good enough shit in the theater. But that's where the rubber's going to meet the road.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of funny with Randall. Why go to the theater for expensive food, crabby people on their phones, talking loudly in my area? The smell not worth it. This is true, and it kind of reminds me. The
Right.
only real bad experiences I've had. There's one. Speaking of Dwayne Johnson movies, I don't know if you remember the movie Rampage, where it was
Yeah.
like him versus like a really big gorilla and big
Right.
wolf,
Based off
whatever.
the video game.
Yeah, there was this one part, and it's the only time I've experienced this. Is like there's a row of like a family behind me, and it was like this one scene, super tense. They're out in the forest, the wolf's trying to track them down, and you have this family behind me just going, "He's behind you! He's behind you!"
Right.
Just like all this stuff. And it's like, what are we doing? This isn't Call of Duty. This is why are you making call outs like they can hear you?
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah.
stuff like that where it's like they
I
can ruin the
hate that
experience.
shit. I hate it so much. I can't stand it. One thing now, look, where you live plays a big role in this as well. Like if you kind of live out somewhere that's like further away, doesn't have a lot of nicer theaters around, whatever, that is easily the issue. One thing I've learned though, uh, target the time of day that you go, right? You try and go at
Yeah,
times of the day when there's less people or not going to be certain types of people. The other thing is, like with Subs A List, people, if you're in a higher format showing, like IMAX or Dolby or something, it's either that you're dealing with the people that have the like movie subscription, like A List, or you're dealing with people that paid a premium to see it, and so they tend to be on their best behavior, right?
yeah,
So it's like if you have that option, that tends to be the way that you deal with less of the bull crap. Now you might just have nothing but crappy theaters near you and crappy people, and then you're just kind of screwed, right? Like
yeah,
you're gonna have to wait till you see it at home if you're not wanting to deal with that. But that does tend to play a factor is like the timing of when you go, and if you see it in a premium format, people are definitely tend to be better behaved. Like even
yeah.
with that sold out theater that I was with, all types of people were in that movie last night, but it was Dolby. It was completely full, and it wasn't didn't have people talking, didn't have people on their phones, didn't have any of that crap because they paid the premium to see it. And so
Yeah.
so
Well, even like
there.
that kind of goes to what we were just talking about. It's like, people's theater experience, like we already said with the prices, that's one thing, but then you go, you pay that price, and then you can just have your theater experience kind of ruined by others. That's another thing. So it's like that's why a lot of people are choosing to just sort of stay at home. But it's kind of wraps this up though. Boomer says go back even further, Good, Bad, Ugly, and other older movies. I think it does come down to like even though it might be these might be good movies, it might
Mhm.
sound good as an idea. You have to think of like who's going to be actually going to this. It's
Right.
with the Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. It's people that have already watched these movies but maybe never saw it in a theater, so they're like, I want the theater experience. How many of those people, or how many people out there, are really feeling that way about most other movies? You know what I mean? And how many movies are really going to bring people to the theater like that? You know.
Right.
I
Right.
just don't think it's really that big of a thing to where like outside of these big franchises that you can really be like, let's pop on Good, Bad, and the Ugly, or all these other movies, and people are gonna come and watch it.
Right. Yeah, I think it just really depends. And if they like market it and let people know that they're doing it too, right? Where
Yeah,
um to intrigue new people, right? And if you market it in the right way and you're like, "Oh, this was, you know, the highest grossing movie or the highest rated movie," or market it in a way that's appealing to people that might have never seen it and didn't know it existed. Um
yeah,
I think that can help. But like you said, if you can see it at home, a lot of people are going to be like, "But why though?" Like,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's, I think you do have to make that theater experience appealing to people again. So it still is on the theaters to make sure that they're well kept and, that there's an expectation of how people need to behave, set, and that kind of thing. Like I was in a movie actually, um, it was months ago. We went to see it, and there were people that brought little kids, multiple little kids, into a very violent R-rated horror movie. And
Dang.
yeah, it was complete bullshit, but the theater
Yeah.
took care of it. Me and multiple other people went out within like left within the first like 10 minutes and were like, look, like I'm gonna walk if these people don't get out of here, and you're gonna have to pay me
Yeah.
back, and I'm gonna cause a stink. And they sure enough, they got all the people out of the theater, and the movie was fine after that. So that's the thing is like if your theater is willing to be proactive and deal with that and be like, you got to go, like you can't pull this shit. So
Yeah.
it definitely does make a difference for sure on how how these theaters kind of operate, versus being like, oh, well, you can leave. We don't want to deal with them. We'll just give you your money back. It's like, no, 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 that's not the solution. You get these people
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah. I mean, like Marianne says right here, last time I went to the theater, I went in, bought my popcorn, came home, watched a movie I just bought. I've heard people do this quite a bit. Is like,
That's wild.
you can buy some type of. Actually, I think you buy the bucket, and then you can go
Right.
back and just get refills. So people just go there, get their refill, and just walk right out with just their popcorn.
That's crazy. That's so funny. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't see doing that. But I also love being in the movie theater, and we have good movie theaters near us, right? So
Yeah.
like maybe I'm spoiled in that aspect. I am, I'm like an hour from Charlotte, but I'm like 30 minutes away from, like other big areas that still have nice theaters and that kind of thing. So it's like it's not way out of my way to be like, hey, I'm gonna drive and go see a movie like we did last night. Um and obviously now I see a lot more than I used to because I do this for a living, right? Like I talk about movies all day. I run this site. I realize to a degree that I'm a bit of an outlier.
Yeah, that's true. Um, well, kind of going back to the movies, what would you say, like in your adulthood years, what movies have stood out to you, or maybe had impact in your more adult years?
Oh, man, the easiest low hanging fruit is Christopher Nolan films. You've got your,
Yeah,
um, things like Interstellar. Even recently, honestly, I was expecting for it not to be as good as it was, but like Oppenheimer, I thought it was going to suck, and that's a movie that I was like, this was so impressive in a nice big format like theater. But also like Edgar Wright movies. Um, as I mentioned, or I don't know if I mentioned, or like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, films like that like Baby Driver, he kind of gives these very awesome experiences. Um, there are, and I mean, look, don't get me wrong, I was huge comic book fan growing up, a big nerd. Like I have a tattoo sleeve on my leg that's nothing but superheroes. Like I love the stuff. I have stacks and stacks of comics. And I loved when Marvel was at its peak and was in its heyday and was just putting out banger after banger.
yeah,
I would have never guessed that that would happen in my lifetime, to where we would get these niche movies about these niche comic book properties and storylines and stuff. And it kind of blows my mind that it happened. And I hope we can get back to it. And I think that it was really, it was a really cool time to be around and seeing things in theaters and watching the MCU evolve and grow. And it's been hard to watch them fall. um,
yeah,
because that was through my kind of a lot of my adult years was watching Marvel grow and become something that, this cool big thing. And even some of what DC was doing. But then there's things like, I saw it when I was younger, but it's like, these pivotal films like The Matrix and stuff that I was able to see in theaters and watch become as culturally relevant as they were. And
yeah,
I do think that there are still some phenomenal creators out there, and but I also think that there's a lot that are not getting the opportunities that they deserve just because of what we're seeing go on in the industry and how selective and kind of discriminatory the industry has been over the past years. I think that there's a lot of very brilliant minds that we are not getting to see create things because they're not given the chance. But with that being said, there is still a lot of really good stuff coming out. It's just quite often they're like lower key indie movies and stuff that nobody's seen or knows about. And that's one of the things that I love about Criticless, is that we do have a dedicated community, a group of people that watch everything, that see the weird stuff, that see the indies, and honestly love being able to have the voice that I have now and be connected with the people that I am, to where like if I think that there's a movie worth kind of making a stink about that's really good, I can be like, go see this, give this movie your money, because there are people still making movies that are excellent, and these people don't hate you and they do want you to watch it, and they're just putting out good entertainment. And so I think that that's what we do need to remember, is that like there are still good people creating in the industry, and there's still really neat um neat films and stuff coming out that last year and the year before that. Oh, actually last year, I don't know, but I was going to say that I still have been giving out like some 100% on new things, which is um kind of rare, right? In this day, where it's like
Yeah.
things we know that they haven't been as good, but there are still some absolute bangers, with like creators like Edgar Wright, who did like the recent Nosferatu movie and stuff, where he's doing these more niche films that are still like getting a whole bunch of love.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing though, is like, do you think it is, because I've heard it happen with actors for sure, of like, actors getting, sort of, what's the term, blackballed or whatever, you
Hmm.
know, being out of the industry because of certain opinions or just for whatever reasons. Do you think that also happens a lot with directors? Because I don't know if I've really heard that, but maybe it's just not as out there.
Oh, it's happening, and it's not even just, and it's just even to like the up and coming people with all this DEI initiative stuff. There are people that are just not given a shot, right? It
Yeah,
might not be people that you knew about, but like they're literally just like, and actors and just different creators and stuff, people in the industry who are like, you don't check off the right boxes, you aren't getting the right job, or you aren't getting the
yeah,
job. Period. And I think that one of the biggest places it is obviously happening, the number one place, it's not even as much with the directors, it's in the writers' rooms. Because really,
mhm,
that's where a lot of this stuff is failing. And that's where the products, like the
yeah,
projects and stuff, are either going to fail or succeed, is if they have a good script, if they have a good story. And a lot of these people in the writers' rooms, they're pushing all of these initiatives, and they're not hiring the right people for the right jobs. And so we are getting shitty thing after shitty thing.
yeah. Well, that's a big thing. I mean, that you bring it up. Like, I mean, I sort of touched on that earlier. It's like the movies of the past 5 or so years. It's like they've just forgotten how to write. Just even if it's just the most simple, like, character arcs, or just relatable characters. It's almost always like they place you in the middle of something. They just kind of expect you to like them just because they're the good guys, or because you're supposed to be on their side. It's very rare now that you get good characters. I will say I just watched Thunderbolts, and I did
Yeah.
review it on Criticless,
Yeah.
and I felt like the story, it didn't really have like it wasn't really too much, your normal superhero, like, oh, here's the big bad villain, or we're gonna save the world. It more so was just a character piece of, like, Bob and Yelena, and I thought that was very good. Now, like, the overall film, I wish it did have a little bit more of a story, but I thought it was a very good, like, character piece. And I felt like
Yeah.
that was the first time in a long time I've seen, especially from the MCU, but just a lot of other, big studio movies, where it's like they kind of got more of an understanding of what makes characters more relatable. Let's try to delve deeper into these characters, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and there are things like that that kind of come out and surprise. And so like I said, there definitely is still really good stuff coming out. You just have to find it, and that's why I love Criticless. It's like, you just go on there and you find those people you trust, and you're like, "Hey, did you check this out? Like, should I spend my time on this?" And there are a lot of things that have been coming out that just absolutely surprised me. Now, on the same hand, there have been things coming out that should have been an instant success, should have been great, and they're not. So we're kind of getting both.
Yeah. Um, what would you say is your, like, top 10 movies of all time? Not necessarily like what you think is like the most, uh, just like, why am I blinking on the word? Like the
Like,
I get,
kind
like,
of
the
like the
technical, like
prestigious
the
films that,
technical, yeah, like, it's not like technically the best, like,
right.
but it's just 10 movies that you feel like either changed your life or just had the most impact on you.
Right. Well, I have to say, just for Critical's sake, because it is the meme, and I always have to lean into the meme, Is
Jaws.
Pacific Rim. No, 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 no. Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is obviously the greatest movie ever made. There's never been a better movie. Pacific Rim is perfect and flawless in every way. So that has to be number one. So I have to continue to lean into that. Now, if you don't know about that meme yet and you haven't taken advantage of it on Criticless, I'll just say Pacific Rim is amazing. So I'll just leave it at that. But that aside, Fight Club, I adore it. I think it is a brilliant film, one of my all-time favorites. I mentioned Scott Pilgrim earlier. Um, Big Fish by Tim Burton, another one
Yeah.
that's way up there. Let's see, Smoking Aces, another one that I adore that I just think is great. Donnie Darko.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about that movie? Like, I feel like it's very interesting, but when I watched it, I had to kind of like think a little bit more about it, and then I had to like go online, search up stuff, and I found a video that kind of explained it. But when I watched it the first time, I was like a little like I understand it, but I kind of don't at the same time. It kind of I had to look up stuff just to like try to put all the pieces together. Is that
Right.
why it's probably one of your favorites?
Honestly, yeah. And I mean, back when I saw it, YouTube didn't exist.
Yeah,
It wasn't a thing. So we just, you just kind of roll with it. I like weird movies that don't always explain themselves, that don't always have answers, that I have to ponder on or think about. I have to see a few times and maybe even never fully know. I like
yeah,
that kind of thing. So yeah, a lot of those types of movies you'll kind of find on my favorites list. And I mean, then you have the ones that you got to put, like Lord of the Rings, I got to put that on
yeah,
there. The Matrix, I have to put that on there. But then I can still put weird ones like Cabin in the Woods is one of my all-time favorite horror movies because it's super meta and weird, right?
yeah,
I'd put it on my list, even though I know that it might not be on a lot of other people's lists. Um,
yeah,
so a lot of the things that you will find being my favorite, honestly, kind of also connect back to that early 2000s era of like weird kind of indie or indie adjacent movies. A
yeah.
lot of mine are going to be in that realm. And that tends to be what I really, really love.
Yeah, check the private chat though, real quick, Blaine. But
Yes, will do.
but kind of speaking of that, for me, I thought about this myself. Like, what would my top 10 be? I don't know if I really have a top 10. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I
Right.
thought about it. I'm like, I don't know if I could. I would say some of my favorite movies though is probably like I put Good Will Hunting up there just because I just love that movie because
Yeah.
I think
Oh, yeah.
the story's great. Robin Williams, Matt Damon,
Hmm.
all that.
Yeah.
But then a lot of it too is just like movies I grew up on, like a lot of animated movies, which kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the whole, cinema stuff. And like, if I said like, oh, these animated movies are my favorite, they're like, well, you don't know movies, you don't know cinema. Like, what are
Right.
you? It's like, no, it's just movies I like, or even just
Right.
like MCU movies or just other, just like weird movies, like
Yeah.
just anything. It's like people are like, oh, you don't know movies. Like,
Right. And
just it's weird.
it is weird, and people are like that, and I just tell them to go kick rocks. Like, I don't care. I don't care if my preferences align with someone else that has super particular preferences or whatever. But I'm also not someone that shames people for liking things. Like, I'm like, love what you love, man. I don't care. It doesn't hurt me any. Like, whatever. And that is a thing too that I'd say we haven't really talked about on here, but for everybody, is like, if you use Criticless and you haven't delved into our lists yet, like, make a list. Just make like your first list of like your favorite films. And I that is like a little rabbit hole you can go down of like just start making some simple list and flesh that out, and it helps you to really kind of think through like what your favorites are, or like and even still, like, sometimes I'll just be like, all right, here's a list of fantasy movies, or here's all my Marvel movies ranked, or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's fun to kind of have those. That way, if somebody asks, you can just pull it up and be like, well, here's a list. I made it.
Yeah. Well, one suggestion for that, because I've made lists,
Yeah.
I think that at some point you should make like either presets or that you can copy other people's lists, because having to
Right.
manually add, every single Star Wars, every single Marvel, every single this, every single,
Right.
it kind of gets a little tedious.
Right, right. So you could like clone a list and then just make it your own.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
that's actually a good idea. That's actually one I don't think anybody's ever said.
Yeah.
And I I don't mind that. I like that because, like you said, with like a because there are things like Star Wars or whatever, where it's like this list already exists, like somewhere somebody's made one.
Yeah.
So why not just take that and then edit it and make it my own?
Yeah. See,
So
this is why I'm
yeah,
going to
that's
be
not a bad idea.
CEO of Criticless.
Right, right. All right,
Yeah.
you're starting to earn your keep and trying to convince me here. So I
Yeah.
hear you. All right.
Yeah. See, look right here.
Yeah,
See, high tide is
a
genius.
to-
See,
a total genius. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but going into like some more like life questions, what would you say is like a moment or maybe just period of time in your life that had like the most impact on you, or like kind of changed who you were or changed the course of your life?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously, I've got kids. I'm married, so there's a big, huge change in you know my life when all of that stuff started happening, and it kind of changes your perspective on the world, and even just my motivated me to do all this and stuff. Where it's like once you have kids, it really puts into perspective like the state of the world and where things are headed, and you're like you want things to be better.
Mm,
And I've been such a fan of entertainment and stuff, and after having kids, and I'm like seeing things get worse, and seeing art get worse, and all of these aspects of just like what has always kind of just been normal culture and the way that people enjoy themselves outside of work and things like that, and to watch it kind of degrade is like having the perspective of like, man, well, maybe I can do something to make this aspect of things a little better for my kids and everyone else.
yeah. Would you say that like that kind of like lit a fire under you like a lot more having kids? 'Cause that's what I've heard is like once you have
Hmm.
kids, you kind of like you sort of said, put stuff in perspective, but also like you're like, I can't really waste time. I gotta, do what I can to like, provide for my family or, take care of them, that sort of thing. Would you say that like really flipped that switch for you?
Yeah, it definitely did for sure. It absolutely does because it really changes your perspective on the overall future, and where things
Yeah.
are. You start to look outside of yourself, right? Because you're
Yeah.
like, well, it's not just me, and obviously I'm going to pass one day, and whatever. It's like
Yeah.
as far as we know, we've only got one of these. But then when you start to look at it, and you're like, well, my name and my kids live on, and whatever. So yeah, it definitely did light a extra fire under my butt for sure. And then especially with all the events of 2020 and when things just got really crazy, and having young kids and being in school and having to take them out of school and just all that crazy shit that happened back then. Um,
Yeah.
and having young kids, it really like put things into perspective.
Also, Banjo says, did not turn a red thumbs up to green. We'll see. If I was CEO, that would have never happened. So, see.
He's right. He did condescend to doing that. I'm still not sure why our thumb. It was kind of more of like a pinkish color. Our thumbs up. I don't know why we did that, and it was stupid, but like it just happened, and then I was like, yeah, no, Bander's right. It does need to flip flop. This is stupid.
um, okay, if you could have one question answered about anything you could think of, anything in the universe, what would you want answered? Or what question would you ask?
Ooh. Ooh. Are we in a simulation? And if so, what is it?
That's two questions.
It's all the same question. All right. I had a feeling you were going to say that because if it was only a yes and a no for the first question, then I still wouldn't be happy. That would not be enough of an answer. You'd be like, oh, yes, it is a simulation. But what, like, is it like the Matrix? Are we plugged in? Or we, you know?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what my question would be. Well, something similar is, what I guess I don't know how to word it, but yeah, basically, like, is there something outside of this? Like, is there God? Is there, like something that like that and get a definitive answer, something like that. Sort
Right.
of what you were saying,
Right. Right.
that'd kind of be
Because
my, I think
it's
that's
kind
most
of the,
people's.
that quandary that arrives with like a genie, right? Where you're like, yeah, it's got to
Yeah.
be perfectly stated, or you're not going to get the result you want.
Yeah.
So depends on how particular whoever's giving me these answers are.
uh, what was the most painful lesson that you've had to learn in life? Whether that's just like, something, let's say you knew, hey, I should not be doing this, or, some mistake that you kept making over and over, or it could even just be one time, like you're like, no, I shouldn't be doing this, boom, and it cost you big time, or like I said, anything like that. What would you say be like the most painful lesson you've had to learn in your life?
Um, it'd probably be involving like trust and who to trust. I tend to be a very trusting person, and I always the way that I operate, I'm very like like we before we started this, I'm an open book with people. Pretty I'm pretty easy to get along with. I'm pretty like transparent and stuff, but I have to remember that everybody's not that way. And like there are definitely people who you shouldn't trust. And I've
Yeah,
had to learn over the years to be a little more guarded and like because which I do tend to, that is the thing, I do tend to be quite discerning of people, but on the same hand I also like to see the best in people, and sometimes you can't predict or control what other people do, and so that's always kind of been a thing for me, is to like keep in mind like this person might not respond or treat this the way that I would want them to, like keep that in mind and not necessarily trust them with everything. So
yeah. I think that's probably the biggest thing for most people. Kind of like what you're saying though, of being guarded is like people will say, oh, you shouldn't have your guard up. You should be more open. But it's kind of like this catch 22. It's like people will say, well, if you have your guard up all the time, you're basically blocking out any good things, but then the flip side is that is like you don't have your guard up, then you're letting in all the bad things. So it's like kind of have to find this line almost of like what you're willing to live with, I guess, is like,
yeah.
I guess it comes down person to person, but I do think it with most things, I guess, is what are you going to be able to live with at the end of the day? Like
Right.
if you're okay with being more open, yes, you might have good things, but you have the bad things, or you're more guarded, and there's good that comes with that, also bad. So I guess it's more to what you sort of want to live your life to.
Right, and I think there's a happy medium, and you learn to find it, and so it's. I think I've gotten there mostly, but it's still, when you're someone who's easy to like make friends and get to know people and whatever, it definitely does. Um, it hurts worse when somebody lets you down, or
Yeah,
whatever. So that has definitely always kind of been a thing for me. And the older I've gotten, which is hard, the older you get, the harder it is to make new friends and stuff. So and make acquaintances and whatever. So because you're not, especially when you have kids and stuff, you're just not in scenarios where you're around tons of people. That's what's been so interesting about me doing all of this, is making all of these online friends and stuff, the YouTube space, who have now become like physical real life friends who I see a couple times a year and different things. So it has been really interesting. And that's the thing that we've noticed with Criticless, is that it's kind of had this effect of like the old school internet, where people are becoming really close, good friends on Criticless. And that type of thing doesn't seem to happen around places like X, or it
yeah,
does. It's to some degree in the YouTube space, just because of like you're having these face to face interactions with people like this.
yeah,
But with Criticless, we're seeing that a lot, where there are people becoming like really close, good friends because of our groups and these other features that we have, where they're like, man, I've been friends with this person on Criticless now for like 2 or 3 years, and we talk every day and we keep up, and I know what's going on with their life. And it's really cool to be able to make friends online around the world again.
yeah. Well, it's kind of going to what you were saying about like trust. I get it's a little bit different, but like sort of that same thing is like being open. You know, I would say maybe not this. It's not the same, but similar in that like I used to definitely be more just like a lurker. Not really engaging, not in chat, whatever. But like once I did it, it like good things came of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not exactly the same, but it's like one of those things of like it's good to like kind of interact more, or just like get outside of your comfort, even if it's in the small ways, stuff like that.
Yeah. 1000%. I definitely agree with that. Step outside of your comfort zone is important, I think, for everyone. It just kind of tends to make you a better person.
Yeah. um Kind of to piggyback off that, what would you say the most important lessons were that you've learned throughout your life?
Um, Important lessons. I guess maybe the number one really is to it's okay to take risks. I come from my dad, and his is not a risk taker at all. My grandfather wasn't much of one either, and um, it took a bit to push me in that direction. It took my wife doing it, but it's taking risks is can be very rewarding. And for much of my life, I played things very safe, and I think that that's definitely really high up there. It's just that it's okay to take risks sometimes. It's okay to step out on a ledge when it might not be fun, and with doing things like being an entrepreneur and starting a business or whatever, because it can be really rewarding. There can be a lot learned from it, and so I do challenge people regularly to be like, hey, just try some new stuff. Like do something that makes you uncomfortable, and it usually pays off.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely like I can relate to that because basically everything that I kind of have on like this online sphere is due to me taking a risk because I didn't really have much video editing experience. Like I had no prior jobs to. I was just kind of like doing it for fun a little bit, and put
Right.
a video together for Beardo, sent it to him, and like everything that's come of it since then. Me working with him, me working with you, Jay, so many other people. This
Yep.
channel now. It's like it's all because one day I was like, I'm gonna just take this risk, even though I might not be the best at it, even though, all this stuff. It's like, I'm just gonna try. I know it's not like the
Right.
same risk as you starting a business and everything, but it's still, like
No.
you just gotta try it sometimes. You gotta just take your shot. If it lands, it could take you different crazy places. And if it
Yeah.
doesn't, you try again.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, and yeah, is to not failure's not always a bad thing. There can be good things that come out of it. So it's like just because it doesn't work out the first time, it doesn't mean you can't try again. So yeah, yeah, that definitely has gone a long ways with me. My wife is, like I said, has been one of the ones to push me to be more like that. Because she is very much a risk taker, and comes from a family of people that all ran their own businesses and stuff. Where my dad, he got into started with IBM and then has just worked for like big companies his whole life. And seeing him be like, man, I wish I had taken more risks, done more things, helped to kind of push me too. So I hope that I can kind of impart that on my kids, and they can see kind of both worlds, where my wife has a more corporate job, I've had more like this, and see the stresses of both, and see maybe finding that balance. And that's why I said earlier in the show, it's like it's good sometimes to be married when you're in this scenario and taking these types of risks. That way it's not the risk isn't totally on your own.
Yeah. Well, I think that's too like kind of what we were saying, like friends. I know it might not be the same, but like, friends, people you can trust, people you can count on, kind of like takes the load off of you, sort of thing. Even just with whether it's business or just anything, it's like if you have people that you can depend on, count on to like kind of take that load off of you so that you don't have to try and make it all work yourself. It makes things a lot easier. And then you can do more yourself with that, time and energy you freed up.
Yep. Yep. No, I totally agree. It absolutely is. And I think that we're starting to see more of a pivot towards things like this that are considered more traditional values, right? And a mindset,
Yeah.
where that kind of loner mentality has been so popular for so long.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of younger people start to be like, oh, no, this shit sucks. Like, life is a lot more fun when it's with
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
So,
Well, kind of can't exactly remember what you just said, but it kind of made me think of it. What would you say your biggest regret would be, or maybe just like something that was a regret, but like you, or something you might have regretted, but like you made the change so that you wouldn't? Because I think a big thing was what you were saying about taking the chances. That a lot of people look back on their life and are like, I wish I would have just tried this thing, or
mhm,
I would have tried more, that sort of thing. Would you say
mhm.
like what would you say would be your biggest regret, or would have been if you didn't change something in your life?
Um, I tend to be very independent when I do things. I don't like asking for help. I don't like, well, in general, yeah, I just don't really like asking for help. I don't, I just kind of like to figure things out on my own. But that can come at a serious risk quite often. And with me being an entrepreneur, running multiple businesses, different things, I think it is important to find people that can give you the best advice and have been through it before. Even not in business, in life too. You know, where if somebody's had some experiences and you know about it, don't be afraid to ask for help, or at least ask for some advice and listen to it and take it seriously. Because that's the other thing too, is you still have to listen once you get that advice. You can't just get the advice and then not listen, right? Like you
Yeah,
have to take it to heart. And it took me a long time to learn that. And the older I've gotten, I've learned it, but it's come at a cost. And so I think truly listening to others, asking for help, and being like open minded to outside input, and not just having so much. And it's not always just like stubbornness or hubris. I think a lot of men tend to be that way, that we tend to
yeah,
just be like, I'm going to figure it out. I got this. I don't, I'm not going
yeah,
to seem like a bitch and ask for help, like, whatever. But it's like,
yeah,
you'll save yourself a lot of headache and heartache if you just go ahead and just ask for someone to give you to give you some advice, at least to be like, hey, what's going to happen if I do X? You've been through this before. Like, what do you think how this will play out? Because doing
yeah,
that can save you a lot of trouble.
yeah. So I guess you would say like one regret is that you wish you would have listened sooner.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. And just been
yeah,
comfortable asking so that I could be told. And
yeah,
I realize, especially when you're younger, if it's your parents or whatever, it can be harder for advice to come from those people. But it's like they're not the only people out there. There are other people that have done things, that have experienced things, to be like, hey, what in your experience, what's going to be the outcome for this? Would it be smart for me to do X or Y? And quite often people are very willing to give advice because they don't want you to deal with the same shit that they did. So
yeah. Karen says, I used to be so afraid to fail, I wouldn't try. I didn't know I'd be successful at it. Perfectionism would kill it. I would say I used to fall in
yes.
this boat too, that like so many things in my life, I would view it as a positive that I didn't fail, but it's like I didn't even try. So it's like, you can't fail if you don't try. So it's like you're
Right.
basically not doing anything. So what is there to be, sort of taken from that? It's like you just
Hmm.
gotta, you can't view it as a positive that you've done nothing, you know.
Right.
It's better to fail because you get better, you learn lessons, right?
Yeah.
Versus you don't do anything, you've learned nothing, you've done nothing, there's no progress being made, there's nothing that came from it.
Right. For sure.
And then Zach Roberts says comparison is a thief of joy. If I think about how far along other men are than me, I feel like such a failure. I feel like that's one of those things of like you just have to learn how to kind of block stuff out and just worry about yourself,
Yeah.
because it's like can't remember the song, but there's some song that's like basically saying like how there's always going to be a life that's better than yours. There's someone that's always going to have a bigger house, a nicer car, this, that, and the third. There's always, no matter what place you are, unless you are like probably Elon Musk or something, Jeff Bezos or something, like there's always
Yeah.
going to be someone that has something more. And even if you're those guys, there's someone who's probably, taller than you, stronger than you,
Oh yeah.
smarter than you. Well, you know what I'm saying. Like, there's always someone that's
Yeah.
better at something. They're better at chess than you. They're better at
Yeah. Right.
Fortnite. There's someone that's always better at you at something. You know what I mean? As stupid as it could
Right.
sound, like they're better at something. So it's like you can always compare in anything. Like, oh, they have socks that I like. I don't know. I'm just making something, but you can always compare on something and always make yourself feel down. So it's like, just stop thinking about it and worry about yourself, because it's like, that's all you're in control of. That's all you can worry about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's good to keep that in mind and have that perspective. And if you start to feel that way, that's when you kind of lean on your friends and be like, hey man, I'm struggling, and that they can help you get back on track. That stuff will eat away at you. So you just can't do it, and you just have to do your best and try your hardest, and keep that in mind. And as long as you can step away, saying that that's what you did, then you know you did.
Yeah. All right. Two quick questions before we
Yeah.
gotta let Blaine go. um, what do you want to be remembered for, Blaine? If people look back and say, Criticless Blaine, this is who he was, what would you want them to sort of say or think about you?
um. Honestly, probably just that I was genuine and real. That's kind of just staying true to myself. Um, is important. Like I don't have to be some kind of legendary figure in the limelight, whatever. Right? Like it's just that like this was somebody that was trying to make a difference, and did what he set out to do and tried to make a difference and like connected people and just stayed real and true to himself while doing it and you know made the friendships and the connections and all of that because it's kind of always the type of person that I've been is like kind of a networker and you know just maintaining relationships with people and staying positive and just trying to make things better, right? That I've always just that's meant a lot to me is even if it's just in my own little sphere is like trying to make the world a better place to some degree and being able to walk away being like, yeah, I did that. And so I hope that, you know, that regardless of what happens with Criticless and where I step away from it, that, you know, that I was just real while I did it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of people's thoughts too. Is just they want to be remembered for being genuine. I would say too, like you know, like you said, being the connections you have with people. I think that's the big thing. You know, in
Mhm.
life is like you can do all these things, but if people don't remember what you did, because most things are going to be forgotten about anyways. But it's the kind of connections you've had with people that are going to last on.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And if you have a message, or if you could have a message for everybody in the world to hear right now, or just throughout time, what would you say?
Oh man. Is you know, if just because someone thinks differently than you about somebody or about something, it doesn't make them a bad person, right? Like just because people have a different set of opinions or a different mindset on life, reality, whatever it is, um, that it doesn't make them wrong and it doesn't make them a bad person. And that seems to be something that we've forgotten and we've lost, seem to be losing a lot of our humanity over the well, it's progressively been happening, but it's just kind of like, hey, you know, we can get along while thinking and being different people. And people seem there seems to be a lot of people who seem to have forgotten that. And I hope that we can get back to remembering that as a society and as a people because it's a real bummer.
Yeah, you know, even though I disagree with Blaine on I don't know what, still a good guy. So
Right. Exactly. Just because I gave Jaws a decent doesn't make me a bad guy. You know, that's
yeah,
really my point in saying all of this is just remember, you know, I'm still just a human inside, even though I think that Jaws is only decent.
yeah. Well, appreciate your time, Blaine.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody being here in the chat. This was episode 1, deep dive with High Tide. Everybody in the chat saying they liked it. At least Marianne says
Awesome.
this was a great show.
Yeah.
I don't know what Sean means by this, but we'll go. Biscuit says we forgive you. So
Oh,
I think we
thanks.
broke a lot of good ground here today,
Yeah.
Blaine. But
I think so.
appreciate you being here, and
Yeah.
appreciate everybody being here. And peace out, everybody.
Later.